Hey guys, tonight we're leaving behind our modern lives filled with soft beds, electric kettles, and allergy medication. Instead, you're trudging up a steep, dust-choked path carved into the limestone cliffs of medieval Armenia. The wind is sharp and dry. Your boots, if you're lucky enough to be wearing any, slip every third step on loose gravel. Overhead, the sky is an ocean of pale gold as the sun prepares to rise. But you won't be watching that for long. Your destination looms above you now, a stone monastery clinging to the edge of a precipice, built more for bees than for humans. The scent of wild thyme and clover is strong in the air, not because the fields are full of flowers, but because dozens, possibly hundreds, of active hives are buzzing just beyond the entrance. Bees crawl along windowsills, bees hover near the bell tower. Bees swirl lazily above a monk who's sweeping the stone steps with an exaggerated slowness that suggests he's trying not to anger his six-legged neighbors. You pause at the threshold. This is your new life. And no, you probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to drop your location and local time in the comments. It's always fun to see where in the world you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The monastery's outer gate creaks open on beeswax-lubricated hinges. A subtle but crucial maintenance trick the monks learned through trial, error, and at least one regrettable accident involving a goat and a wheelbarrow. The stone walkway is uneven and pitted from years of dripping honey, eroded by weather, and maybe, just maybe, eroded also by the acid of time itself, at least according to one monk's extremely dramatic diary entry. The walls are covered in faded frescoes of saints holding honeycombs like scepters, their faces more tired than holy. You're greeted by Brother Ananias, a man whose beard is impressively long, impressively gray, and impressively sticky. He wears the same simple robe as all the others, undyed wool, beeswax-smudged hem, a rope belt hung with what appear to be hive tools. Yes, that's a smoke funnel, a curved hive knife, and, naturally, a small wooden effigy of Saint Harutun, patron saint of harmonious swarming. Scholars still argue whether Harutun was a real person or a clever metaphor created by the monks to justify their strange habit of talking to bees like they were gossiping neighbors. You're ushered into the main courtyard, where rows of ancient wooden hives sit like little domed cathedrals. Some are carved with religious symbols, others are tagged with obscure runes that the monks claim deter bears. The smell is overwhelming, a heady blend of wax, smoke, pollen, and fermented sweetness. It clings to your nostrils like a second skin. You sneeze. A dozen monks turn in slow, alarmed unison. It's time for orientation. You won't find a welcome packet here, but Brother Ananias gestures for you to sit on a stone bench that still radiates the chill of the night. He tells you in slow, almost sung tones that the bees are not merely livestock. They are sisters, messengers, interpreters of divine will. They are not to be swatted, even if they crawl into your ear, which he assures you has happened before, but only to those who lacked faith or personal hygiene. You nod solemnly, and try not to scratch the back of your neck, where a tickle might very well be the beginnings of your first sting, or your 15th. It's hard to keep count once your adrenaline spikes. One monk begins rhythmically thumping a carved wooden board called a nekos, used to call bees, or monks, to attention. You're not sure which. In fact, you're increasingly unsure of everything. In this moment, you may be comforted by the thought that this monastery actually existed, one of many tucked into the gorges and ravines of medieval Armenia, devoted not only to spiritual practice, but also to perfecting apiary science centuries before such a term existed. The architecture is real, the bee-centric theology also real, though historians still debate whether the deeper symbolism was mystical or just pragmatic. Bees, after all, don't eat much and don't talk back. As you rise from the stone bench, a bell tolls from above, its tone low, sticky, and somehow buzzing. You glance up. A bell rope, frayed and glistening, is made of twined waxed linen and bee gut. You don't want to ask how they discovered that particular combination. And so your first hour begins, not with meditation or prayer, but with a procession of monks in stiff robes marching toward the apiary fields. You follow, clutching a borrowed hood and wondering how exactly one survives here without becoming just another part of the comb. The procession winds its way toward the eastern edge of the monastery, where a sharp outcrop juts over the gorge like a crooked finger. The terrain here is rocky and cracked, dusted with moss that refuses to bloom properly. And you realize that every monk's footfall is deliberately light. No stomping. No sudden steps. These men have been trained in the slow, almost reverent art of not provoking thousands of winged sentinels. They lead you to the apiary, a collection of hives so old that some are practically fossilized. The monks call them the Elder Thrones. These aren't modern box hives, they're woven cylinders, wooden domes, and hollowed-out logs sealed with resin and tiny carved saints wedged into the cracks like divine duct tape. One is bandaged with layers of linen strips. Yes, that's real medieval bee triage. You're impressed. You're also starting to itch, probably psychosomatic, hopefully. Brother Sahak, a wide-eyed monk with a permanently nervous energy, hands you a bundle of dried herbs. Hold this near your chest, he whispers, and try to think gentle thoughts. The herbs are mostly thyme and mugwort, which the monks claim make you smell less aggressive. There's no science behind that, though historians note that aromatic herbs were commonly used in medieval Armenian rituals, sometimes to repel evil, sometimes to cover up body odor. Possibly both. Smoke begins to curl from hand-carved censers, swaying in a gentle breeze that smells like roasted rosemary and pine tar. The smoke, thick but oddly calming, drifts across the hives. The bees, previously in a frenzy of sunrise flurry, begin to settle. This is the beginning of what the monks call the soft hour, the brief window before midday when hives are most pliable and the bees least murdery. You're handed a robe, one size fits none, and a leather veil that feels like a curtain stitched together by someone who only recently learned what thread is. The veil smells faintly of goat and regret. You slip it on. Immediately, a bee lands on the outside and begins what you're sure is a personal vendetta. It eventually flies off. You try to act like you weren't panicking just then. Each monk moves to a different hive in total silence, opening the lids with slow, rhythmic movements. The lids creak. Bees shuffle. Somewhere, a faint chime rings, wind through a wax bell. You're told to observe only, not touch. You nod, though your hands were already firmly glued to your sides in nervous solidarity. Brother Krikor, the unofficial head beekeeper, begins to mutter a chant under his breath as he lifts a wooden comb from one of the elder hives. It glistens, not just with honey, but with what he solemnly refers to as blessed warmth. You're skeptical. Then again, the comb is strangely warm for something not recently in the sun. Krikor says nothing else, he just lets you stare. As you watch, another monk points out the queen, clearly marked with a dab of yellow ochre. "We use egg yolk," he says softly, painted with a hedgehog quill. The image is ridiculous, yet charming. Historians note that monks in isolated communities often developed quirky adaptations for tools, though whether the hedgehog quill was practical or symbolic remains an open debate. The hive inspection continues. They check for fungus, mites, signs of sin. One monk jokes with a smile so slow it feels like a sunrise. You're not sure he's kidding. Every imperfection in the comb is scrutinized and whispered over. One monk swears that a lopsided wax cell is a prophecy. Another believes a curved honey trail is evidence of divine displeasure. The others just nod politely, because no one wants to argue with Brother David when he's in one of his moods. After an hour, your legs are sore, your back aches, and you've developed a strange respect for the patients involved in monastic beekeeping. Also, you are approximately 95% sure that your left sock is now full of bees. But the monks don't let up. The ritual continues, hive by hive, comb by comb. Then, suddenly, an alarm. Not a bell, not a shout, but the collective intake of breath from 10 men in robes. You look over. One hive has collapsed inward slightly. A swarm begins to rise in a golden tornado of wings. The monks drop into a well-rehearsed response. One bangs the nakos, another sprays a burst of herbal smoke, a third raises both hands and begins humming in a low tone that vibrates your ribs. The bees hesitate. They hover. They retreat. You exhale. You didn't realize you were holding your breath. One monk, Brother Hovhannes, a man with more beard than face, smiles at you. The bees respect calm, he says, and fear jazz hands. You're not sure that's true, but you appreciate the humor, especially here where death by 300 stings is a very real possibility. By the end of the soft hour, the hives have been inspected, minor repairs made, and a handful of combs collected for today's meals. The monks bow toward the east, toward the rising light, and chant a short hymn of thanks, not to God specifically, but to the radiant daughters of the sun, which you assume means bees. Maybe, probably. You walk back with the group, bees still clinging to your veil, your skin sticky, your heart oddly full. You survive the first real test, barely. Back in the main hall, you're asked to remove your veil and robe, but only after you've gently shaken it out. Twice. Bees often linger, the monks explain, and no one wants a repeat of the hood incident, which involved a sting in a place you really don't want to imagine. You strip the veil carefully, and yes, 2 bees drop to the floor, both unbothered and mildly curious about your bootlaces. The hall itself is simple but heavy with atmosphere. Long benches of dark wood, walls carved with reliefs of winged saints and honeycombed halos. On one panel, a monk is depicted being stung repeatedly while still smiling, a testament to either divine bliss or very poor artistic understanding of facial expressions. The air smells faintly of candle smoke, beeswax, old parchment, and something earthy, like damp wool left too close to a hearth. This is where the rules of the monastery are written, literally. Not on paper, but on great tablets of pressed wax mounted in wooden frames along the wall. Brother Krikor, the master scribe, explains. These beeswax slates are reused over and over. When one becomes too scratched or stained with honey drips, it's melted down and reshaped. The rules evolve, he says, but the wax remembers. You lean closer to read one of the rules. Rule 12. Speak not near the hives unless the queen demands it. You raise an eyebrow. Krikor shrugs. Interpretation is encouraged, so long as it's quiet. Another reads, Rule 27. If thou art stung thrice in prayer, reconsider thy posture. And then, Rule 38. Do not feed Brother Hovhannes any more fermented honey after complain. It's at once deeply spiritual and delightfully specific. Scholars who've examined fragments of similar monastic codes note that humor was not uncommon in isolated religious communities. When your social circle includes 15 people and 1 million bees, gallows humor becomes a necessity. You're offered a seat while Brother Krikor fetches a stylus. Everyone inscribes their welcome vow, he says, handing you a blunt iron rod and gesturing to a fresh sheet of wax. The stylus is slightly warm from being left near a hearth, and as you press it into the soft surface, you realize how difficult it is to write legibly without tearing the wax. Your handwriting looks like you composed it mid-earthquake, but the monks nod solemnly. Very devout, Brother Sahak whispers. Once your vow is etched, it's smoothed with a dab of resin, sealed with a carved stamp, and hung beside a dozen others on the eastern wall. One belongs to a man simply listed as Gregor the Itchy, another, Mariam, who mistook bees for raisins. You're starting to suspect not all of these initiates made it through the full day. The next ritual involves your official induction, which is less a ceremony and more a confusing series of gestures involving a jar of honey, a whisper into a hive, and what you swear was a polite bow to a queen bee. The monks don't clarify. They just smile and nod like it all makes perfect sense. One of the more curious traditions you learn about here is the sting ledger. It's a running tally kept in a small book. Yes, paper, not wax, tracking who's been stung, how often, and in what location. Brother Ananias, the sting master, an unofficial title but one he wears with pride, shows you a few of the more infamous entries. Brother Yegishi, stung 11 times in 1 hour. Refused to stop quoting Psalms. Guest from Tbilisi, stung on both eyelids, tried to pet a hive. Father Superior, no stings in 20 years, suspected witchcraft. You are not yet in the book. But you suspect that by sunset you will be. As the morning winds on, Brother Krikor gives you a quick lesson in hand signals. Since speaking is discouraged during many parts of the day, monks communicate using a blend of gestures and facial twitches. A hand to the nose means, I need smoke. Tapping the left temple twice means, bees are in my hood. Holding up 3 fingers while looking mournful apparently signals, I have been stung thrice in prayer. The system is elaborate and absurdly expressive. You try mimicking a few, only to be warned, gently, that one of your gestures just insulted Saint Harutyun's favorite hive. You quickly apologize to the nearest bees. Mid-morning arrives, and the monastery bell tolls again, this time with a dull clong that reverberates through your ribs. The monks rise as one, dust off their robes, and begin marching silently toward the refectory. You follow, still sticky, slightly sting paranoid, and wondering what a group that considers bees holy considers food. The refectory is carved directly into the cliffside, lit by narrow slits in the rock that spill golden light onto long wooden tables. The tablecloths are waxed linen, the spoons are carved from bone, and the plates, large, shallow bowls made from compressed honeycomb wax, reforged every month, you're told, which may or may not be true. Before eating, the monks chant a short verse about the sweetness of labor and the sustenance of wings. Then, finally, bowls are filled with a porridge-like substance that smells decent. Sort of nutty, probably barley. You take a bite. It's barley and honey, a lot of honey. A cloying, throat-coating, teeth-aching amount of honey. You try to hide your grimace. This meal is the same every day, 3 times a day. Barley, sometimes bread, always honey, occasionally dried berries. Historians note that honey was indeed a dietary staple in some isolated Armenian communities, used both for preservation and as a sweetener when sugar was inaccessible. The monks, however, insist it's all symbolic. You nod politely, force down a few spoonfuls, and try to ignore the small bee that lands on the rim of your bowl, staring at you like it's judging your technique. And so your first formal meal ends in quiet contemplation, aching molars, and one deep realization. You're going to be very, very sticky by the end of today. You leave the refectory with honey-coated teeth and a slightly woozy stomach. As you try to shake off the sugar fog, Brother Sahak pats you on the shoulder and beckons you toward the chapel, what he refers to as the hive house of heaven. You don't ask questions. At this point, nothing would surprise you, not even a literal hive being used as an altar. The chapel is smaller than you imagined, tucked against the rear of the main monastery compound, with arched windows glazed in smoky amber. Bees crawl lazily across the glass, casting twitchy golden shadows on the flagstone floor. The scent inside is overwhelming, a thick stew of incense, beeswax, and old wood polish. You think you catch a whiff of clove oil too, though that may be your still reeling sinuses. As you take your seat on a low wooden bench, you notice that instead of a traditional altar cross, there's a carved icon of Saint Harutyun holding what appears to be a giant honey dipper. Around him, angels hover with wax wings. One looks suspiciously like it's wearing a beekeeper's hood. Brother Ananias begins the service by tapping a long wooden clapper, similar to an Eastern semantron, against a frame of hollowed wood. The echo resonates like a slow heartbeat. No bells. Bells would startle the bees. Instead, every note in the monastery is muffled, mellowed, softened like cloth soaked in warm milk. The chanting begins, low and slow, the kind that wraps around your ears like a wool blanket. The lyrics are sung in classical Armenian, but the cadence is universally calming, like lullabies hummed across generations. The monks chant psalms, hymns, and something that might be a list of bee-friendly herbs, though it's hard to say. The harmony is punctuated by the occasional buzz drifting in from the rafters. A monk walks the aisles with a censer, swinging it gently, releasing a fragrant cloud that smells like dried fig and myrrh. You're told it also contains bee balm, an herb known to calm both humans and insects. Historians still argue whether its widespread use in monastic settings was practical, spiritual, or just a medieval version of aromatherapy. As the smoke curls upward, you spot small wooden boxes embedded into the chapel's upper walls, miniature hives. Yes, they've literally built beehives into the walls of their sacred space. The bees slip in and out through discreet slits in the stone, pollinating wildflowers before returning to their holy chambers. The symbolism is not subtle. Neither is the buzzing. Brother Krikor steps forward to give what you assume is a sermon. He speaks in gentle, measured tones, his voice barely above the ambient hum. You don't understand most of it, but you catch the word zachgik, flower, repeated several times. He lifts a candle molded in the shape of a bee and lights it with a slow, almost theatrical motion. The wax runs down its sides like golden sap. You shift uncomfortably on the bench. The seat is carved with hexagonal patterns and slightly concave, as if molded by centuries of stiff-robed monks. A bee lands on your forearm. You freeze. It lingers, tickling your skin with its delicate legs, then lifts off as silently as it arrived. You exhale. Slowly. As the sermon continues, your attention drifts. You study the architecture, vaulted stone ceilings painted with faded frescoes, including one of Saint Grigor wrestling what looks like a swarm of bees shaped like a dragon. There's also a scene of a monk lying in bed while bees build combs around his feet. No one seems to find this odd. The final hymn is sung in near whisper, just above a breath. The monks close their eyes, sway slightly, and press their palms together in a gesture that looks more like hive inspection readiness than prayer. As the last note fades, the only sound remaining is the soft droning from the hive walls and the occasional creak of wood shifting under weight. The monks remain seated for several minutes in complete silence. No one moves. You don't either, afraid to break the spell. It's oddly peaceful, despite the occasional bee darting through the air like a wayward thought. Eventually, Brother Ananias rises and gestures for you to follow him. You shuffle out, blinking against the daylight, and realize your ears are still ringing, not with sound, but with silence, the kind of silence that feels earned. Heavy, sacred. As you exit, you notice a monk kneeling near the chapel's side wall, pressing a small, folded note into a hollow between stones. You glance at Brother Sahak, who nods. "Prayers for the bees," he says. "Some are born sick. Some don't find their way home." It hits you then how genuinely intertwined this place is with its tiny, buzzing inhabitants. These monks don't just keep bees. They live with them, sing to them, pray for them, mourn them. They've woven insect and man into a single humming whole. On your way out, you're handed a candle, smooth, beeswax, the size of a fat carrot, and told to carry it at all times. Light it during moments of uncertainty, Brother Krikor says. Or when you forget your place in the swarm. You're not sure whether he means that literally or metaphorically. At this point, it could go either way. The chapel door closes behind you with a muffled thunk. You clutch the candle. Your belly is still sticky. Your back is sore. You're not remotely religious, but for a brief moment, you kind of get it. You haven't even made it back to your cell, your temporary dormitory, they generously called it, when Brother Sahak gently guides you toward a side room near the courtyard. "You must eat," he says, his voice barely more than a whisper. "It's time for second breaking. You ask nothing. Asking only gets you more answers. And in this place, answers are usually honey-soaked, mildly disturbing, or both. The second breaking, as it turns out, isn't another full meal. It's more like a mid-morning sustenance ritual. You're led to a narrow room with a sloped ceiling and walls lined with clay jars, beeswax sealed and stacked like a library of golden secrets. The air is dense with sweetness. There's honey here in every imaginable form, raw, creamed, crystallized, fermented, and even smoked. A low wooden table holds an array of thin slices of barley bread, hard cheese, and small bowls filled with different kinds of honey. You're encouraged to sample each, slowly, reverently, as if each taste might reveal a piece of divine wisdom. You begin with a spoonful of something pale and whipped to a buttery consistency. It melts on your tongue, floral and creamy with notes of lavender and something you can't quite place. Maybe wild mint. Brother Krikor informs you that this one comes from hives kept near high-altitude cliff flowers. The bees there rarely sting, he says, too tired from flying up. You nod, chewing slowly. Then comes a dark, almost bitter variety, thick like molasses and smoky. From old combs, Brother Sahak explains, aged like wine, or grudges. The final sample is served with a single sprig of rosemary floating on the surface. It's fermented, possibly mead that was forgotten in a jar long ago, now transformed into something halfway between vinegar and elixir. Very sacred, says one monk. Or very spoiled, adds another. Historians still debate whether these fermented honeys were intentionally created or happy accidents the monks chose to spiritualize. As you nibble the bread and sample the strange, sticky offerings, the conversation turns to the monks' strict dietary codes. Fasting is common here, not only from food, but from flavor. Some weeks they consume nothing but unflavored porridge and water. Other weeks they allow feasts of sweetness, where honey is incorporated into every meal. You're told this is one of those weeks. You try not to look too relieved. You also learn that the honey isn't just for nourishment. It's considered a tool for spiritual clarity. Sugar sharpens memory, Brother Krikor insists, though you're skeptical. And bees, he adds with a serious nod, never forget. Somewhere in the corner, a monk begins sketching bees onto the wall with charcoal, murmuring what might be prayers or possibly recipes. He's documenting their wing shapes, Brother Sahak says. Last week, he was convinced the Queen's wings spelled out a warning. You're not sure if this is an earnest belief or a polite way of saying he needs a nap. One curious ritual they share involves something called the dividing spoon, a long carved spoon passed from monk to monk every full moon, used to scoop honey from a sacred jar. Whoever draws the darkest drop is believed to be harboring impure thoughts. You ask, what happens then? Nothing, Sahak says, but everyone watches you slightly closer for the next week. You're offered a chance to use the spoon yourself, and with no small amount of pressure, you do. Your drop is a pleasant amber, no side eyes. You breathe easier. Next comes the cleansing ritual. You are handed a cloth soaked in warm water and a drop of propolis, bee resin known for its antibacterial properties. Wipe your hands, your face, your neck. But not your eyes, Sahak warns. Brother Yegishi once wiped his eyes. It changed him. You decide not to ask. Once cleaned, you're taken to the far end of the honey chamber where a large stone bowl rests in a pedestal. The bowl of seeing, they call it. It's filled with water and a thin sheen of honey oil floating on the surface. You're asked to peer into it. You do. All you see is your own face, puffy from pollen, a little sweaty, possibly sporting a welt. The reflection shifts as the honey dances over the water. You'll see more in time, says Brother Krikor. If the bees allow it, that's comforting. In a vaguely threatening way. You finally leave the honey room with your lips stuck together and your stomach humming like a low cello. The sugar high is real. The world seems sharper, warmer, but also slightly fuzzy around the edges, as though you're wrapped in a golden haze. Outside, the day has brightened. A warm breeze pushes through the courtyard, heavy with the smell of pine sap and crushed thyme. Bees swarm lazily around the flower beds, which you now notice are planted in the shapes of Armenian letters. Brother Sahak informs you it's time to assist with candle duty. You're not entirely sure what that means, but you suspect it involves beeswax and, inevitably, more stickiness. You sigh, stretch, and follow. Somewhere deep in your brain, past the buzzing, past the sugar fog, past the sense that you may never leave this place intact, a very small voice wonders, is this what peace feels like? Then a bee lands in your ear, and peace dies a buzzing death. Candle duty, as it turns out, is less about solemn religious practice and more about relentless manual labor, of the sticky, smelly, wax-covered variety. You are led to what the monks call the womb, which you're told refers to the candle-making room's warmth, silence, and complete lack of natural light. Brother Krikor adds that it also births illumination. You're not sure whether to be inspired or concerned. The womb is located beneath the chapel, down a steep stone stairwell that smells like wet clay and very old honey. The air is thick and warm. 2 monks are already there when you arrive, sweating quietly as they melt giant bricks of beeswax in iron kettles over slow-burning embers. The heat is gentle but inescapable. It clings to your skin like a second layer of syrup. You're handed a wick, just a strand of tightly braided flax cord, and shown how to dip it, over and over, into the liquid wax. Dip, raise, let it cool. Repeat. The repetition is hypnotic. There's no talking, just the sound of dripping wax, occasional shifting coals, and the soft clink of cooling candles being hung on racks that look suspiciously like medieval torture devices. The candles you're making aren't small. They're towering, thumb-thick pillars of wax designed to burn for days. Some are molded with saintly faces, others with bee-shaped reliefs. You're told the monks believe beeswax carries prayers more faithfully than tallow or oil. It's the only wax made without death, Brother Sahak explains. Tallow comes from slaughter. Oil from pressing. Bees give it freely. You pause, holding your half-formed candle, and wonder how much the bees really enjoy their contributions. One monk, Brother Arakel, mutters that they used to bless each candle individually, whispering a hymn into the wax before it hardened. We stopped, he adds. Too many accidental scoldings. Still, the ritual carries deep symbolic weight. As you work, you're encouraged to focus on a particular thought or memory, something you wish to illuminate. You choose a simple one, your own name, which after half a day here feels slightly distant, like a word that belongs to someone else. Your hands soon grow sore. Beeswax isn't heavy, but it builds up over time. And the smell, it's not unpleasant, but constant, rich and earthy with hints of smoke, wood, and faintly sour honey. It clings to your robe, your sleeves, even the tiny hairs on your arms. You can already feel a mild headache forming behind your eyes. One of the stranger traditions surrounding candle duty is what the monks call the honoring of the stub. At the end of every batch, the shortest, ugliest candle, usually one that broke or warped, is chosen to represent the forgotten monk. They light it alone, let it burn all the way down, and place the puddle of wax in a small box marked failures. It's not as morbid as it sounds. Even the broken bring light, Brother Krikor says with a wink. You watch as Brother Arakel selects today's stub. It's yours. Of course it is. He lights it, bows slightly, and sets it in a dark alcove where other wax stubs have formed a small mountain of golden lumps. As you continue dipping and cooling, Brother Sahak shares a legend. the tale of the endless flame. Supposedly, centuries ago, a single candle burned without interruption in this very monastery for over 40 years. Fed only by faith, he says. Historians roll their eyes at this story, suspecting clever wax topping and strategic shifts in candle placement. But the monks believe, or at least they enjoy pretending to. You learn that each monk is responsible for maintaining at least one candle at all times. They keep them in their rooms, lighting them during prayer or stormy nights. Some carve personal symbols into theirs: crosses, bees, suns, even cryptic initials. You're invited to carve your own. You hesitate, then etch a simple star into your candle's side. Symbol of direction, Sahak says approvingly. The heat grows heavier. Wax coats your hands, your sleeves, and somehow your hair. Brother Krikor suggests a break, so you're taken to a small bench outside the womb. There, a jug of water is passed around, infused with mint and tiny, floating flecks of bee pollen. You sip. It's oddly refreshing, slightly gritty, and leaves a golden mustache on your upper lip. While you rest, Sahak tells you about the candle trials, a long-abandoned tradition where initiates had to carry a lit candle from the womb to the cliff's edge during high wind. Only a few ever succeeded, he says, glancing toward the drop-off with a faint smile. The rest became very good at starting over. You're grateful this trial has been retired. Just as you begin to recover, Brother Hovhannes arrives with a box of wax scraps and announces it's time to mold the icon candles, special ones reserved for feast days. They feature detailed reliefs of saints, bees, and scenes from scripture. You're given a mold of Saint Harutyun, but the detail work is maddening. The wax cools too fast, your hands are too clumsy, and at one point, Saint Harutyun ends up with a truly regrettable face. You try again and again. By your fourth attempt, the saint still looks like he's mid-sneeze, but Sahak claps you on the back. He has never looked so expressive. Candle duty ends with a prayer, one whispered over the racks of cooling wax. You're invited to join. You murmur something half-coherent about illumination and forgiveness and try not to sneeze into the resin. As you exit the womb, arms aching, candle wax flecked across your face, you blink into the sunlight and hear the buzz of bees returning to their hives. You feel lightheaded, but also a little proud. You survived another ritual, and as the monks hang your very first usable candle near the chapel door, with a note that simply reads "Guest Star," you realize you've officially contributed something to this strange golden world. Even if it's lopsided, there's no time for celebration, no time to marvel at your wobbly candle or scrub the wax out of your sleeves. The bell tolls again, 4 slow thuds from the wooden Nakos board, and Brother Ananias appears beside you like a summoned ghost. "Time to climb," he says, already walking away. You follow, your legs aching, your fingers sticky, your brain buzzing slightly from residual sugar and candle fumes. You're led toward the back of the monastery, where the rock face rears up like a sheer gray curtain. A narrow path snakes along its side, zigzagging through tight crevices and half-carved steps that barely qualify as stairs. At the base, a wooden gate groans open. Bees hover in the air like sentries. This, Ananias explains, is the way to the apiary tower, a structure clinging to the cliff face like a bird's nest, made of stone, rope, and maybe a little bit of wishful thinking. You stare up. It's at least 4 stories high, built directly into the rock, partially suspended with ropes and anchored with timber beams. Small boxes, hives, jut out at every level, with wooden walkways connecting them like tiny balconies. It looks wildly unsafe. It also looks like it was designed by someone who had never heard of gravity. You begin the climb. The first ladder is stone, carved into the cliffside, worn smooth by centuries of cautious feet. You cling to the wall, muttering quiet prayers to every saint you've ever heard of, including 1 or 2 you might have invented just now. Brother Sahak climbs behind you, completely unbothered, humming a slow hymn that you assume is either for your encouragement or his own amusement. At the first landing, you pause to catch your breath. The view is staggering, rolling green hills, distant rivers, flashing in the sun, a hawk circling overhead. You'd enjoy it more if your knees weren't actively vibrating from fear. You cling to the rail, and a bee lands on your hand. You don't move. You simply whisper, "Please, don't make this worse." The bee leaves. You live another minute. You continue up. The next portion is a rope bridge, yes, really, that stretches between two ledges of the cliff. The planks creak, the ropes sway. You glance down once and instantly regret it. Sahak, behind you, says gently, "Do not look down. The bees never do." You nod, stepping forward with the trembling commitment of someone who now deeply questions every life choice that led to this moment. You reach the tower. It's even stranger up close. The hives are embedded into the stone and wood, forming a sort of vertical apiary. Each one is labeled with tiny plaques written in Armenian script and small sketches: bees, flowers, sunbursts. Some hives are active, buzzing with life. Others are quiet, their entrances corked with beeswax plugs. "Retired queens," Sahak explains. "We honor their silence." Inside the tower, it's surprisingly cool and dim. Shafts of light filter through slatted windows, illuminating floating dust and drifting bees. The hum is constant, a low, living vibration that fills your chest. It's oddly calming, like the monastery is breathing around you. You're led to a small platform where Brother Krikor is waiting with tools, wooden scrapers, a copper smoker, and a strange-looking pouch that turns out to be stuffed with dried thyme. "Today we inspect the sky hives," he says. "You are not inspecting anything, you are observing." At best, holding tools, possibly hiding behind a barrel. The monks, however, move with quiet confidence, opening hives, checking combs, murmuring to bees like old friends. You learn that these tower hives are special. They're used for observation, not harvest. "We study behavior," Krikor explains. "Flight patterns, comb angles, bee temperament." He opens a hive and gestures. "See, this one is restless. Rain is coming." You peer in. The comb is perfect, geometric, golden, glistening. Bees crawl along it like moving punctuation. You swear one looks at you with disdain. One of the more curious features of the apiary tower is its bee library, a shelf containing dozens of tiny wax tablets engraved with daily hive notes. Each monk records bee behavior with near religious detail. Hive 4C, queen sluggish, drones argumentative. Hive 2A, built comb in spiral, possibly symbolic. Hive 5B, bee sat on thumb for 10 minutes. Unclear meaning. Scholars have reviewed these notes and concluded that while some are valid observations, many border on surreal poetry. It was their way of meditating, one researcher wrote, or slowly losing their minds in the most charming way. You're shown how to handle a frame of honeycomb, gently, evenly, never tilting. The monks check for brood cells, parasites, moisture. Every now and then, they hum softly to the bees, adjusting their tone based on the hive's energy. They respond to vibration, Krikor tells you. Like us. You try it, you hum a little tune. The bees seem unimpressed, but at least they don't attack. At one point, Sahak gestures you toward the edge of the tower where a large wooden funnel extends outward like a musical instrument. "That's the swarm horn," he says. "Used to call back wandering bees." You peer down the funnel and shout a soft, "Hello?" A puff of dust shoots out the other end, and a few bees return, curiously circling the tower. The monks nod approvingly. "You have a good swarm voice," someone says. You try not to look smug. Your time in the tower ends with the monks sealing a comb in a wax-covered jar, a practice dating back centuries. "We archive it," Krikor says, "a record of the day's sweetness." As you descend, legs trembling, hands raw, bees still orbiting your head like tiny satellites, you pause halfway down the rope bridge. The wind picks up. The valley stretches before you like a living painting. You realize, strangely, that for the first time today, you're not afraid. Or maybe you're just too tired to care. The descent from the apiary tower is somehow worse than the climb. Your knees lock up halfway down. Your hands are clammy with leftover wax and fear, and you're genuinely unsure if you're sweating or if that's just a slow honey leak from your sleeve. Brother Sahak offers no comfort. He simply walks behind you with the unhurried steadiness of someone who's either very holy or entirely numb to mortal danger. You finally reach the bottom without falling, though your calf muscles have issued a formal complaint and may be planning a revolt by nightfall. You're told you can rest, but only briefly, because the next sacred task awaits, calming the hives for the golden hour. You blink at the phrase, "Isn't that just a nice time for selfies?" Not here. In the monastery, golden hour is a specific window in the late afternoon when the bees begin returning en masse from foraging, heavy with nectar and pollen. It's a time of transition, a time of careful observation, and most importantly, a time of scented smoke. The monks prepare for this ritual with almost theatrical calm. Brass censers are filled with a blend of dried herbs, thyme, sage, lavender, mugwort, and crushed pine resin. The recipe varies by season and by monk, and apparently by mood. Brother Krikor sniffs one blend and announces, "This smells too combative," then adds a single petal of wild rose. Now it listens. You try not to question that. Each monk takes a censer and begins to pace slowly along the hive paths, swinging the smoke over the entrances in a gentle rhythm. You're handed your own, smaller, made of clay and slightly scorched at the base. The smoke drifts up like incense at a summer festival, curling lazily around your face and filling your nose with the odd comfort of campfires and baked herbs. The bees respond immediately. Their droning slows, their flight paths smooth out, and the air seems to soften. One lands on your shoulder and just sits. No crawling, no buzzing. Just rest. You whisper a polite hello, and it blinks at you. Or maybe you imagined that. There's something undeniably hypnotic about this hour. The light itself changes, turning the entire courtyard into a painting. The hives glow. The monks seem to float. Your own heartbeat sinks to the gentle hum of the air, and then, because nothing here is allowed to be too peaceful, Brother Arakel gets stung. It's not dramatic. He simply pauses, touches his neck, and nods once. "A reminder," he says. You ask if he's okay. He shrugs. Pain is part of the prayer. Right. That leads into a lecture on the monastery's peculiar bee-sting philosophy. Apparently, being stung during golden hour is considered a sign of unresolved inner conflict. The bees are excellent judges of character, Sahak tells you. They sting with intent. Historians still argue whether this belief was symbolic or just a way to cope with frequent stings. Either way, it has shaped a very strange approach to conflict resolution. Later, you learn that some monks volunteer to be stung, believing it purifies the body and mind. "One sting for the tongue," says Krikor. To purify speech, one for the hands, to bless labor, one for the feet, to walk humbly. You ask if you're supposed to participate. "No," Sahak says. "You haven't earned that honor yet." You're not sure if you feel left out or profoundly relieved. As the light dims further, a strange stillness falls. The bees, once darting and busy, now settle into their hives. Their wings no longer hum with energy but tremble like soft vibrations of sleep. The monks watch silently, counting, noting who returns, who lingers, who doesn't. Each bee is treated like a monk in miniature, part of the brotherhood, subject to the same rhythms and responsibilities. You help seal a hive for the night, pressing a beeswax plug gently into place with a small wooden mallet. The motion is slow, careful, reverent. You're starting to understand the rhythm of this place. Everything is slow because everything matters. A careless movement here can end in chaos. Bees everywhere, honey spilled, peace disrupted. You've seen Brother Sahak whisper apologies to a hive after bumping it with his elbow. You now do the same, almost instinctively. With the last hive sealed and the censers empty, the monks gather in the center of the courtyard for a short chant. This one's wordless, just humming in harmony, layered like the combs inside a hive, low voices, soft harmony. A drone of human sound to mirror the bees. You close your eyes, and for a moment you swear you're inside a hive. The warmth, the sound, the closeness. When it ends, no one speaks. The sun has nearly set. The monks disperse without instruction, each walking quietly to his next task. Brother Krikor hands you a small comb, golden and warm, wrapped in a leaf of fig. Your labor's sweetness, he says. You thank him. He just nods. As you bite into the comb, soft, chewy, a burst of floral sweetness, you sit on a low stone wall and realize you've lost track of time. There are no clocks here. Only bells, bees, light. And now, stars. The sky begins to darken. The courtyard glows with the gentle flicker of the candles you helped make earlier. Their light dances on the stone. Bees vanish into their hives like thoughts at the edge of sleep. And you strangely feel like you belong here. Maybe not forever, but for now. By the time the stars are fully out, you've been roped into what the monks call documentation duty, which sounds harmless until you see the tools involved. Ink made from crushed walnut shells, quills trimmed from goose feathers, and scrolls of parchment that crackle like firewood when unrolled. You're led into the scriptorium, a long, narrow room with arched ceilings and only a single flickering beeswax lantern at the center, suspended from a rope pulley system the monks call the sun that never leaves. The air is thick with old parchment, ink fumes, and a faint hint of, is that chamomile? You're told the scribes occasionally steam herbs below the floorboards to promote mental clarity. Sometimes it works, Sahak says. Sometimes it just makes everyone sleepy. You're seated at a wooden desk, smoothed from centuries of elbows and ink drips. A small comb of honey sits beside your parchment, a reward and a writing aid. If your letters begin to slant, Brother Arakel advises, take a bite. Brother Krikor explains that the monastery keeps daily records, not just of weather and bee behavior, but of dreams, prophecies, wax yields, sting locations, and how often Brother Hovhannes trips over his own robes. All knowledge is sacred, Krikor says, even the embarrassing kind. You're assigned to copy a page from the lexicon of hive events, an ongoing chronicle of notable bee activities. Today's entry includes, Queen 3A laid her 700th egg. A feast was not held, but emotionally acknowledged. Hive 6B engaged in unseasonal waggle dancing. Possible omen. Guest fell asleep in candle room. Bees did not sting. Considered favorable. You're the guest. You pretend not to notice. The ink is thick and slow to dry. Every letter takes effort, and the temptation to scratch your nose with inky fingers is nearly unbearable. You resist. Barely. Brother Sahak, seated beside you, is documenting pollen color variations on a hand-drawn hex chart that looks equal parts scientific and prophetic. Today's pollen had notes of violet, he murmurs. And perhaps remorse? You glance at him. He shrugs. The bees seemed regretful. Hard to explain. While the older monks write with calm precision, the younger novices are tasked with illustrations. One is drawing a queen bee the size of a chicken, with elaborate wings shaped like stained glass. Another is sketching a monk surrounded by glowing hives, light streaming from his fingertips. An allegory, he explains, or maybe Brother Krikor on a good day. You're handed a second scroll, this one blank, and told it's your turn to contribute. Anything bee-related is acceptable, a poem, a memory, even a question. You chew your lip, think hard, then write. Today I carried smoke and fear up a tower, and neither stung me. You sign it with a small drawing of a bee. Not a good drawing, but the monks nod appreciatively. Brother Arakel stamps it with the monastery seal, a circle enclosing a honeycomb, and tucks it into a scroll box labeled Guest Insights. You're told it'll be reviewed in winter, when the bees hibernate and the monks grow nostalgic. As the documentation winds down, Brother Hovhannes brings out the memory jar, a clay vessel containing rolled-up scraps of parchment, each describing a memory involving bees. One by one, monks read them aloud. The time we tried to anoint a new hive with holy water. The bees did not approve. When Brother Arakel whispered to the queen and she followed him for an entire afternoon. The bee that landed on the candle and lived. We still don't understand. You're invited to contribute. You write something short. A bee sat on my boot during golden hour. I didn't move. I breathed instead. They read it aloud. Several monks nod. One whispers, "He gets it now." You try to figure out what you're supposed to have gotten. Maybe it's not meant to be clear. The final ritual of the evening is the lighting of the midnight candles. Each monk takes one of the tall beeswax tapers made earlier in the day and lights it from the central lantern. One by one, they carry them to different corners of the monastery, chapel, apiary, refectory, scriptorium, leaving little trails of light that flicker against the stone. You're given your own candle, wobbly, wax-specked, and unmistakably yours. You carry it toward the eastern balcony overlooking the valley. The wind is soft. The stars stretch across the sky like spilled salt. You light the candle, cup it with your hand, and let the warm glow fill your vision. Somewhere behind you, a monk begins humming, low. Soft, a tune that doesn't need lyrics. You hum along. Your candle sputters once, then steadies. You stay there longer than you need to, long enough to feel the warmth settle in your chest. Long enough for the bees to sleep, long enough to forget what the world outside even sounds like. The candle is still flickering when Brother Sahak returns to your side, his own flame casting a halo over his deeply lined face. "You've done well," he says, as if you've just passed a mysterious exam you didn't know you were taking. You nod, unsure of what to say. Your wax-dripped, mildly burnt candle wobbles slightly in the breeze. He steadies it with 2 fingers. "Time for rest," he murmurs. You follow him back into the monastery, winding through the now shadowy corridors where earlier chants still seem to echo faintly. Your footsteps are soft on the smooth flagstones, and every so often you glimpse the glow of another candle left in a window or by a door. Silent signals to the night, like lighthouses for bees and men alike. Your cell is tiny. A single bed made from a frame of cedar branches and rope. A thin wool blanket. One beeswax candle already lit beside a small wooden stool. And on the far wall, a carved hexagon. Every monk's room has one, you're told. It's not a religious symbol exactly, but a shape of belonging. "We live in cells like they do," Sahak had said. Every monk a cell, every cell a hole. Before you can settle in, Sahak insists you complete one final task, an evening self-inspection. "Check for stings, splinters, and wax burns," he says with the casualness of a man who does this every night. You go through the motions. One small welt on your forearm, possibly a sting, possibly just a bump from your tower climbing misadventure. A bit of wax crusted into your eyebrow, and your hands covered in flecks of gold, like you've been panning for treasure in candlelight. You sit on the edge of the bed, your body aching in that oddly satisfying way, like after swimming all day or hauling too many blankets. Outside your door, the sound of bees is gone. At night, the hives hum but do not stir. The monks say this is when the queen dreams, and no one dares disturb her. You blow out your candle. Total darkness. Then, a knock. You open the door to find Brother Hovhannes holding a small jar. Inside, honey, of course, but also tiny crushed petals. He hands it to you. "For dreams," he says, "one drop on the tongue." You hesitate. "Just one," he adds, smiling. You taste it. Floral, slightly sharp, surprisingly minty. Not at all like the thick, cloying sweetness of earlier. This is different, lighter, calmer. He leaves without another word. You lie down, staring up at the low ceiling. Carved into it, barely visible in the dim light, is another hexagon. You wonder how many monks have stared at it over the centuries, how many bees have passed beneath it, buzzing toward the open window just above your bed. The night air drifts in, cool and dry. Somewhere far off, you hear a faint rustle, probably a hedgehog in the herb garden, or possibly a monk in need of midnight mead. Your thoughts wander. Back to the first sting, back to the endless climb to the apiary tower, to the smoke hour, the chanting, the weight of wax on your arms. You feel it all again, but now it's muted, as if wrapped in gauze. Your breath slows. Outside your window, a single bee drifts past. Not a dream, not quite real either. You close your eyes. And just before sleep takes you, you remember what Sahak whispered that morning. The bees remember everything. You're starting to believe he was right. Morning returns with no bells, just the sound of fluttering wings brushing the shutters like a gentle warning. You blink into the soft light filtering through the parchment-curtained window, and for a moment you forget where you are. Then your back aches, your hands feel stiff and wax-slick, and you remember the bees. All of them. The monastery begins its day without fanfare. The corridor outside your room is already bustling with soft footsteps, muffled voices, and the low thump of the nekos being struck somewhere deeper inside. No one knocks, no one shouts. The rhythm here is always gentle, even when you oversleep, as you clearly have. You stumble out of bed and find a folded robe at your door, clean, fresh, and faintly scented with lemon balm and smoke. A small note is tucked into its fold. For the field. That's all it says. The monks aren't much for elaboration. As you dress and make your way to the outer courtyard, you notice something different. Everyone's in motion, but not rushed. More focused. Buckets are being carried, baskets unpacked, tools oiled. You catch Brother Krikor adjusting a harness made of rope and reeds. "We're going to the edge," he tells you. "It's time to visit the wild hives." The wild hives. You nod like you know what that means. You do not. You follow a small group of monks out past the eastern wall, down a narrow path that snakes along the ridge, gradually descending into a shallow valley below. The terrain changes, less stone, more green. Ferns crowd the path. Bees dart ahead like scouts. The monks are quiet. The only sound is the brush of robes and the occasional crunch of gravel. Eventually, you reach a grove of twisted trees, old ones. Gnarled, sun-bleached, shaped by wind and time into odd, almost human forms. Their trunks are riddled with holes, splits and pockets, natural crevices that now house the wild hives. These are not cultivated, not labeled or maintained. These are bee sanctuaries, and they belong to no one. Brother Sahak steps forward first, lighting a small bundle of herbs and wafting the smoke gently around the trees. He murmurs something, not a chant, more like a greeting. "We always ask first," he says. "It's their home, not ours." You help gather dry leaves and brush to clear a path between two hives, careful not to disturb the tall stalks of goldenrod blooming nearby. Bees move in and out of the trees like tiny gatekeepers, bumping your elbow, landing briefly on your shoulder, inspecting, then leaving. You try to relax. The monks say the wild bees are gentler, more observant. Less prone to sting unless provoked. And yet, they also say the wild bees remember everything. Brother Krikor uncorks a small bottle and dabs honey at the base of one tree. An offering, he says. "We don't take from these hives," he tells you, "but we listen." How does one listen to wild bees? You don't have to ask. Krikor gestures for silence and points to the trunk. You place your hand on the bark. It's warm, vibrating faintly. A living hum, muffled by wood, like the inside of a violin being played underwater. You press your ear to it, and in the stillness of the grove, you hear it, the collective breath of 1,000 wings. For a moment, it feels like the tree is talking to you. Later, you sit beneath one of the oldest trees while the monks collect samples, pollen from nearby flowers, wax flakes from a hollow knot in the bark. Nothing invasive, just observation. Brother Arakel records the colors in a small ledger: amber, lemon, moss gray, rust. He hums as he writes, occasionally glancing up as if waiting for the bees to correct him. One of the older monks, Brother Garin, silent all morning, approaches with a carved wooden bowl filled with a murky liquid. "Wild brew," Sahak whispers, "fermented with what the bees leave behind. It smells like herbs, citrus, and a memory you can't quite place. You sip. It's taut, slightly fizzy, and tastes like the forest floor after rain. Refreshing, confusing. Some say it gives dreams," Sahak says. Others just burp. You try to maintain a dignified silence. You fail. Before you leave the grove, each monk bows to the trees. You do too, half sincere, half unsure. A few bees land on your boot as if to acknowledge the gesture. One climbs onto your knee and stares at you for a moment. You stare back. It eventually flies off. You choose to interpret that as a blessing. The walk back is quiet, more reflective. The monks don't speak, neither do you. There's something about the wild hives that makes words feel unnecessary, maybe even disrespectful. Back at the monastery gates, the bell rings twice. Time to return to chores, studies, chants. But for now, you sit on a stone bench, holding a fresh wax tablet Brother Krikor handed you with no explanation. Carved into the corner is a single word: remember. You trace it with your finger, and you do, just as you're settling in to copy your memory from the wild hive visit onto the wax tablet. Brother Hofhannes appears again, his face partially obscured by a swarm of bees resting comfortably in his beard. You flinch. He doesn't. He's holding a jar filled with pale golden liquid and a bundle of linen cloths. "Time to make sacred drink," he says. You assume he means mead. You are only partly right. You follow him to a low, sun-warmed annex tucked beneath a lean-to covered in creeping vines and flaking paint. The monks call it the sweet room, though the smell suggests it might also double as the fermentation room of slight regret. Inside, it's dark and earthy. Barrels line the walls, big ones, small ones, some sealed with beeswax, others gently hissing with the unmistakable sound of fermenting life. Mead making here is not just an act of preservation, it's a ritual. "This is not tavern drink," Brother Krikor warns you, appearing from the shadows like a beekeeper Batman. "This is prayer that fizzes." You learn quickly that nothing is wasted in the monastery. The comb's too old for honey, the dregs of strained jars, the golden foam scraped from the tops of still warm vats. Everything is blended, steeped, fermented, and blessed. "Every bubble a syllable," Hovannes whispers, as he uncorks a barrel and gestures for you to inhale. You do. Your nose is immediately filled with scents of fermented pear, burnt herbs, and something faintly medicinal. Not unpleasant, just complex. They teach you the process. First, you dissolve the honey. Never overheat, just warm water and patience. Then herbs are added. Rosemary for clarity, thyme for memory, and a pinch of wormwood for dreams. You raise an eyebrow. Hofhannes shrugs. Small dreams, not the dangerous kind. Fermentation vessels are blessed with a chant. Not a long one, just a soft humming that Brother Arakel says helps keep the wildness orderly. Some monks insist the bees hum along, others claim that's nonsense. Historians still argue whether monastic fermentation practices were meant to evoke spiritual metaphor or simply to reduce spoilage, Sahak quips, elbow deep in a barrel. Once the mixtures are sealed, the monks take turns marking the date on small parchment tags. You're given one to write. Guest blend, not dead yet, is gently vetoed and replaced with new flame late bloom after a polite but firm pause from Brother Krikor. The most curious part comes next, the tasting rites. You're led to a side table where small cups, carved from dried gourd skins and sealed with wax, wait to be filled. Each monk pours a sip of an aged blend from the monastery's private stash. The colors range from golden to murky brown to something that could be confused with pond water if you were in a bad mood. You're invited to taste. The first is sharp and citrusy, like lemon wrapped in pine needles. You cough. The second is darker, almost syrupy, with a strange note of smoke and mushroom. You glance at Sahak. Black truffle, he says. The bees liked it. We tried it, regretted nothing. The third is sweet and delicate, with a trailing scent of wildflower. It sits on your tongue like sunlight. That one you like, a lot. Brother Hovhannes nods. That's from the Queen's year. We had a record bloom. And no stings for 7 days. You're not sure which part is more impressive. After tasting, the monks offer a toast, not with clinks, but with raised cups and soft humming. Each monk hums a different note, but somehow they blend, creating a tone that fills the room like a golden fog. You join in, badly, but sincerely. Then, the unexpected twist. You're told that once per season, the monks use the sacred mead for dream medicine. It's a blend meant not to intoxicate, but to guide thoughts during evening contemplation. You're handed a small cup. This is not for joy, Krikor says. It's for clarity. You sip. It's gentle. Smooth. Sweet at first, then bitter in the back of your throat. Your fingers tingle. Your eyelids feel just a little heavier. The monks begin speaking slower, or maybe your mind is moving faster. It's hard to tell. You're guided, quietly, out to the herb garden to sit with the bees, though it's unclear whether that means metaphorically or literally. You choose a bench under a canopy of late summer vines and lean back. Your thoughts drift, not into sleep, but into something adjacent to it. You remember the comb in your hands at dawn, the hum beneath the bark, the taste of smoke on your tongue. The monk who swore the bees were writing letters with their legs. You remember it all, as if the honey itself stored those memories for you. You come back to yourself as a breeze brushes your face. A bee lands softly on your wrist. You don't move. You don't need to. From behind you, Brother Sahak's voice floats in. We don't drink to forget here. We drink to remember gently. You nod. You understand. As evening leans into night again, your thoughts are still sweetened and slightly slowed by the dream medicine. You walk like you're wrapped in wool, soft-footed, distant, but oddly content. You're not entirely sure where you're going until Brother Krikor beckons you silently from beneath the fig tree near the chapel wall. In his hand is a knife. In the other, a slab of comb wax. You hesitate. He smiles and gestures to a long wooden bench covered in curled wood shavings and strips of half-carved candles. Tonight, it's waxwork hour. The monks don't just make candles. They also carve beeswax tablets and sculptures. Some are decorative. Some are devotional. And some, you learn, are deliberately absurd. You sit beside Brother Krikor, who hands you a small block of golden wax and a paring knife worn smooth from years of use. Let the wax decide, he says. You are not sure what that means. You begin anyway. The wax is warm, soft enough to carve with ease, but firm enough to resist lazy movements. It demands attention. Brother Krikor is working on a bas-relief of Saint Harutyun. He's given him 6 fingers and bee antennae. You ask if that's a mistake. Krikor shrugs. Holiness varies. Other monks arrive sitting in quiet clusters. Some carve hexagonal tiles, others sculpt tiny animals. Bees, birds, occasionally what looks suspiciously like a goat wearing a robe. You start simple. A spiral. Then a flower. Then, without really thinking about it, a small monk figure holding a comb like a shield. It's not good. But it is yours. Sahak leans over and peers at your work. Looks brave, he says. You weren't aiming for brave, but you'll take it. Waxworking isn't just about shaping, it's about remembering. The monks talk softly as they carve, sharing memories, jokes, even confessions. You hear one mutter, "I once named a queen bee after my mother. She stung me." Make of that what you will. Another recalls the time Brother Hovhannes fell asleep in the hives and awoke entombed in comb. No one believed him until they found wax in his ears. Occasionally, a monk pauses to press their finished piece into a press mold, making it a permanent tile to be used in the scriptorium or given to visitors. You're invited to do the same. Your little monk warrior is pressed into a circular tablet. Krikor stamps it with the seal. Guest, evening work. As the wax cools, the monks begin placing their finished pieces on a low table beneath a wide open window. The breeze carries the scent of lemon balm and wild honey into the room. Stars glimmer above. And then, without any signal, a new tradition begins. One by one, the monks retrieve small wax tablets from a box and begin reading aloud. These are bee readings, entries written by previous monks or long-past guests. Stories, fables, bits of wisdom gathered over centuries. Some are anonymous, some are famous. All are strange. Brother Sahak reads, "Once a bee told me I was thinking too loudly. I apologized. It winked." Brother Krikor follows. "The queen died one winter. We held a vigil. The hives hummed all night." Then Brother Arakel reads a rather poetic entry. "If you want to understand the hive, stop looking at the queen. Watch the ones cleaning the walls. You're handed a wax tablet and asked to read the next. The words are etched deep. A guest came here once. She stayed 3 days. She left with no honey, only peace." You pause. Everyone nods. One monk places a new tablet beside yours, carving into it your initials. Well, the best version of them he can guess, given the limitations of Armenian cursive and wax. The readings end. Silence returns. Not solemn, just soft. Then Sahak begins another part of the tradition, the laughing comb. A wax model of a honeycomb is passed around, and each monk has to tell the most absurd bee-related story they've heard or invented. It's ridiculous and deeply necessary. Brother Hovhannes claims he once taught a bee to recognize his voice. Brother Garin insists a bee led him to a hidden patch of time that cured his sciatica. A novice swears he saw 2 bees fencing with grass blades. Laughter builds, not loud but real. And when the comb reaches you, you pause. Then you say, "A bee landed on my scroll and added a punctuation mark. It made more sense afterward." They chuckle. The wax is passed on. The night winds down slowly, with the monks placing their finished carvings in rows along the window ledge to harden in the night air. The lanterns are dimmed. One by one, monks file out, robes brushing the stone floor like leaves in wind. You remain for a moment, running your finger over the tiny monk you carved earlier. You think about the softness of the wax, the stillness of the room, the way laughter lives quietly here, like pollen in the air. And just as you blow out the candle, you catch a glimpse of a bee resting on the window frame. Asleep, just like you're about to be. The next morning, you're roused not by sound, but by light, the slow spill of dawn through the open window, golden and steady, dusting your blanket in soft warmth. You stretch, your joints protest. The smell of beeswax clings to your robe like a perfume you didn't ask for, but have started to tolerate. There's a folded note tucked into the seam of your door again. This time, just one word: laundry. It seems even in monasteries of bee-worshipping monks, chores remain universal. You follow the now familiar corridors, through the herb garden, where bees bob like pollen-dusted lanterns, and down a path that winds behind the apiary walls. The stream you'd only glimpsed before now babbles gently before you, shaded by olive trees and framed by great flat rocks, perfect for scrubbing and sawbacks. The monks call this place the River of Stings. You try not to think about it too hard. Brother Arakel is already there, kneeling in the shallows, slapping a robe against a flat stone with the precision of a man who's been doing this since he could crawl. "Welcome," he says without looking up. "Don't get attached to the soap. The bees made it." You blink. Of course they did. You're handed a block of waxy, herb-scented soap carved with hexagons. It smells like lavender and old promises. Your assigned task is simple. Wash your robe and then hang it to dry without attracting too many bees. Easy enough, until the wind shifts. The moment your soap hits the robe, 2 bees land on it. Then 3, then 10. Brother Arakel gestures calmly with a reed fan. They're only curious. Don't swat. That's how we lost Brother Mikhail's dignity. You hold your breath and gently swirl your robe in the cold stream. The water stings your fingers, but in a way that feels more invigorating than painful. Bees hover. One perches on your elbow as if supervising. Washing complete, you drape the robe over a line strung between 2 apricot trees. The other monks have done the same. Robes sway like sleepy ghosts, steaming slightly in the rising sun. Then comes part 2, wax rinsing. Yes, wax rinsing. You're shown to a shallow basin where used wax from candle making and hive repairs is cleaned, boiled, strained, and cooled for reuse. The monks insist it's a sacred task. Wax is memory, Sahak says, holding up a cloth thick with golden scrapings. It must be purified gently. You're given a small strainer and instructed to swirl the warm, softened wax slowly, skimming out flecks of ash, herb bits, and the occasional bee leg. Every speck tells a story, Sahak explains. Some are funny, some are funerals. As you work, the heat of the wax seeps into your arms, soothing the ache in your wrists from yesterday's carving. It's oddly peaceful, monotonous, yes, but meditative. A few bees float nearby, drawn to the scent, but uninterested in your efforts. Afterward, the clean wax is poured into shallow trays to cool and solidify. You're invited to inscribe one with a stylus. For identification, Arakel says. But the monks go further, etching prayers, names, even tiny pictures. You decide on a single word. Still, it's enough. With the robes dry and the wax trays cooling in the sun, the monks gather for a short rest. You sit beneath the shade of an overgrown pomegranate tree, nibbling dried figs and sipping cool water from a clay cup. The bees leave you alone now. As if they've accepted you, Sahak tells a story as you rest, about a time, years ago, when a bear wandered into the monastery gardens. It didn't go for the honey, he says. It went for the soap. Laughter bubbles up around the circle. "We considered making bear-scented candles," Krikor adds, deadpan. "They did not sell well. Even the oldest monks chuckle." The kind of laugh that's half memory, half disbelief that they're all still here. Once the rest ends, the final ritual of River Day begins, wax ball forming. You weren't warned about this. The monks take the remaining cleaned wax and begin rolling it into balls, soft, sticky, slow. Each one is meant to be stored for later melting or kneading into ointments, sealants, and anointing blends. The balls are uniform in size, roughly the weight of a ripe plum, and when stacked together, look oddly like glowing fruit. Each monk marks his wax ball with a thumbprint, a quiet kind of signature. You're given one to roll. It sticks to your palms. It picks up dust, herbs, and possibly a beetle wing. Still, you press your thumb into the top. A soft pop as it sinks in. Brother Krikor holds it up to the light. "Ugly," he says. You brace for critique. "But earnest," he adds. "Like all first wax. You're not sure if that's praise." But you take it. The balls are placed in a shallow clay bowl marked with a spiral and set in the shade. One monk mutters a short prayer over them. Something about preservation, something about patience. You're given the rest of the day to rest. But instead of retreating to your cell, you sit near the wax. beneath the apricot trees, robe rescented with sunlight and soap, hands still warm from the wax. And you wonder, quietly, sincerely, if maybe you're becoming just a little bit monk-shaped yourself. Not forever. Just for now. You awaken from a nap you hadn't meant to take, cheek lined with the imprint of an apricot leaf, fingers still faintly sticky from wax. The courtyard is hushed, lit now with that deep golden light that comes just before evening, when shadows grow long and bees begin their slow, circular return. Brother Sahak appears beside you like he always does, without announcement, without hurry. He hands you a small linen-wrapped bundle. Inside, a lump of wax, warm and fragrant, molded into the shape of a bee. Commemoration piece, he says. For those who survive the river day without complaint, you accept it with a bow. Whether you've truly survived is up for debate, but your knees still bend and your fingers still flex, so technically you're intact. There's little time to dwell. Brother Krikor gestures from the far corner of the courtyard. To the tax hall, he calls softly. You follow. Now, in most monasteries, a tax hall might be where ledgers are kept, tithes tallied, or grain recorded. Not here. At the Armenian honey monastery, the queen's tax is a literal division of the daily honey haul, measured, tasted, categorized, and distributed with mathematical precision, spiritual weight, and just a hint of passive-aggressive ritual. You enter a low room with sloped shelves lined in jars, tall ones, fat ones, sealed with wax, corked with wood, or draped in cloth, each marked with tiny parchment tags scrawled in an ancient looping hand. You squint and read, for guests with nightmares, for bathing the feet of itchy saints. Unruly batch, smells of onions? This is not your typical treasury. The center of the room features a large wooden table, stained with centuries of use. The monks gather around, and the daily honey is brought in, ladled into wide bowls. Some pale and floral, some deep amber and viscous like syrupy shadows. The monks taste it slowly, carefully. No spoons. Just thin wooden paddles touched to the tongue. Clover and regret, one says, smacking his lips. Strong mint. Possibly from Brother Hovhannes's soap stash, another mutters. This one tastes like the prayers from Tuesday, Sahak says, eyes closed. You are invited to taste. You take a paddle, dip it into the nearest bowl. The honey clings like liquid gold, rich and fragrant. You try a tiny dab, lavender, a hint of burnt pine. And something else, something oddly nostalgic. Brother Krikor records your impressions. Guest tongue, he writes in his ledger, says nostalgic, possibly over-sugared. Then comes the division. The queen's tax is an old rule. Every third portion of honey, by weight, is set aside for communal use. Candles, medicines, offerings, and rituals. The rest is split among the monks, the guests, and the wild hives. Yes, you're told some is returned to the trees in the valley as a gesture of respect. Jars are weighed on old brass scales. Cloths are dipped in honey and set aside for wound care. A portion is even massaged into wood carvings to preserve them. Nothing is wasted. The last portion of the division is ceremonial. The first jar, the best-tasting sample, is given a special treatment. It is sealed with a wax imprint bearing the mark of the monastery's most revered queen bee. Her image is crude but unmistakable. Wide abdomen, arched wings, and a tiny crown. Queen Anahit, Sahak whispers. Lived 17 months, unheard of. Inspired half our hymns. Historians still argue whether Anahit was an actual bee or an allegorical invention to unite the order. The monks, they know, and they're not telling. As the jars are sealed, Brother Arakel begins humming one of those slow, spiraling chants that seems to circle back on itself. The other monks join in, and the tax hall fills with sound. Not loud, not grand, just sure of itself. You hum too. It feels like the right thing to do. When the ritual ends, the queen's tax jars are placed in a stone alcove and surrounded by herbs, rosemary, thyme, and a few wilted violets. You're asked to place a sprig of sage beside the largest jar. You do. Krikor smiles. You now owe the bees a favor. You're about to ask what that means, but Brother Hovhannes appears with a basket of tools. Favor collection begins now, he says, gesturing toward the southern apiary. You sigh, then follow. The southern hives are newer, a bit more temperamental. These are where younger queens rule, bold, wild, slightly unstable. They buzz louder, one monk jokes. More opinions. Your job? Hold the wax boards while monks inspect for mites. It's simple. Until the bees decide they're not in the mood, you're bumped, sniffed. Crawled on. You hold your ground, just barely. At one point, a bee lands directly on your lip. You go very still. Brother Krikor gently removes it with a daisy. You're not even mad. As the sun begins to set, the final jar is carried into the refectory, tonight's honey ration for bread. You return to the hall, sore, sticky, and faintly vibrating from proximity to so many wings. Supper is bread and barley, of course, but now slathered with honey from the queen's tax, floral, rich, well-earned. You chew slowly, watching the candles flicker in their sconces. You think of the jar with your sage beside it. You think of Queen Anahit. You think, maybe tomorrow you'll be brave enough to visit her shrine. Or maybe the shrine will visit you in your dreams. You don't remember falling asleep. One moment you're scraping the last of the queen's tax honey from a wooden spoon, and the next you're being roused gently by Brother Sahak, who's holding a lantern shaped like a bee, its wings casting soft golden shadows across the ceiling of your cell. Time for watch, he says. Watch. You don't ask. At this point, it's better to assume things will be confusing, mildly terrifying, and somehow involve bees. You follow him into the courtyard, where the moon has painted everything in shades of bone and silver. The hives are silent. The monks are assembled. Not all of them, just a few. Watch, Sahak explains, is a rotating nighttime ritual where selected monks take shifts monitoring the monastery's perimeter, checking the hives and, most curiously, listening. Some nights, Krikor tells you, you can hear her dreaming. He doesn't explain who her is. You are handed a staff topped with a wax seal and a bundle of dried herbs wrapped in cloth. The scent is immediately grounding, lavender, marjoram, chamomile. It smells like bedtime and danger avoidance. You're also given a small bell with a beeswax plug wedged inside. If you truly need help, Arakel explains, pull the plug and ring, but only if the threat is greater than you can whisper to. You nod. Silently, hope you never need to ring it. The monastery grounds feel different at night. Everything that felt quaint during the day now carries weight. The beehives loom like crypts. The wind in the olive trees creaks like questions. Shadows move, even when you don't. You're assigned the eastern path, which winds past the outer herb garden and skirts the ridge near the wild hive grove. Brother Hovhannes walks with you. He's silent at first, the kind of silent that says, "I'm not ignoring you, I'm just entirely elsewhere." You reach the ridge and stand there, staring out into the black velvet valley below. Stars coat the sky like pollen on a bee's back. Somewhere in the dark, a nightjar sings. You lean on your staff and wait. Then Hovhannes speaks. She doesn't always dream in words. You glance over. He's staring at the hives. You'll know it when it happens, he says, then walks away to check the south wall. You're alone. You breathe, and then you do hear something, not a voice. Not music, more like tone, vibration. A soft, steady hum that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It thrums in your ribs, under your fingernails, at the base of your skull, not loud. Not aggressive, but impossible to ignore. You sit on a stone bench and close your eyes. And there it is again, the hive's breath, or hers. Your thoughts begin to blur. Images flicker behind your eyelids, hexagons spinning like kaleidoscopes, queens with wings of parchment, monks carved from wax, bees writing letters in air. You're not asleep, but not awake either. Historians still argue whether these experiences were spiritual, chemical, or just the product of overexposure to scented wax and low blood sugar. The monks don't care. Truth reveals itself, Krikor once said, whether or not you're watching. After some time, minutes, hours, Brother Sahak returns and gently touches your shoulder. It's time. You nod, rise slowly, limbs heavy. The monks reassemble for the final act of watch, the return of the flame. Each carries a candle made the day before. One by one, they light them from the lantern in the refectory. You do the same, your fingers trembling slightly as the flame catches. The wax softens, the light steadies. Then in silence, the monks walk back to the chapel. The interior is dim, perfumed with sleep and smoke. Bees rest in the hive alcoves. The icon of Saint Harutyan glimmers faintly in the candlelight. The monks kneel and place their candles before the altar, yours among them. Sahak says a single word. Tser, light. Then nothing else, no chants, no scripture. Only the sound of the flame. You stay kneeling long after the others rise. It feels right. When you finally return to your cell, you find a small gift resting on your pillow, a wax-sealed scroll. You break the seal. Inside, a simple note in looping Armenian script. Tonight, you listened. That's all we ask. Below it, pressed into the paper, is the faint outline of a bee's wing. You set it aside, lie down and drift. Not into sleep, into quiet, into stillness. Into the hum beneath the world. Morning comes wrapped in gray mist. No sun beams through the window, just a cool, milky haze that settles across the monastery like a soft blanket. You wake to the scent of damp stone and thyme. Somewhere distant, the Nakos thumps a slow rhythm. It feels like the heartbeat of the building itself. You rise, groggy but calm, and shuffle into your robe. Your wax-sealed scroll from the night before rests on the stool beside your bed. You run your finger over the faint outline of the bee's wing, then tuck it into your sash. Outside, the courtyard is quiet. Bees fly low and slow in the cool air. Brother Sahak is waiting by the fig tree, holding a bundle of tools. Time for comb work, he says, and gestures you toward the central apiary. Today's task sounds deceptively simple. Clean the combs. You arrive to find several monks already at work, seated around broad wooden tables under the awning of the eastern wall. Before them lie frames of dark, gnarled wax, old combs removed from the hives for inspection and reuse. They're full of bits of debris, shed wings, pollen husks, and the occasional suspicious speck of unidentifiable bee dust. You're handed a long, curved scraper. It resembles a tiny sickle, worn smooth from decades of use. Patience, Brother Krikor says. The comb tells you what to keep. You begin. The combs are strangely intimate things, fragile yet firm, fragrant with a scent that blends honey, resin, wood, and thyme. As you scrape gently through one, you find a perfectly preserved bee, curled in what looks like a sleeping pose. Dead midwinter, Sahak says, glancing over. Some pass away at home. The hive doesn't forget. You pause. Then, gently, you remove her, place her on a small cloth, and continue. The monks sort the wax into 3 piles, one for reuse, one for ceremony, and one for what they call the silence pot. You ask what that is. Sahak taps the rim of a dark clay jar. Wax that has listened too long, he says. It deserves rest. You decide not to ask follow-ups. As the hours pass, your scraper moves with more confidence. You begin to notice patterns, slightly different cell shapes, changes in coloration, traces of pollen that tint the comb in rose or sage green. Krikor leans over your shoulder and points to a small dip in one corner. That's where they paused. Rain day, maybe. Or mourning. You don't ask what bees mourn. You already know he wouldn't answer directly. Between tasks, the monks sip from wooden bowls filled with a tea made from boiled wax scraps, lemon rind, and rose petals. It tastes strange, warm and mildly bitter, like tea brewed from the memory of a candle. You drink it anyway. Then comes the counting. Each monk selects one section of cleaned comb and begins to count the hexagonal cells, carefully, reverently. Sahak explains that this is a form of meditation. 100 cells, 100 thoughts. Let the wax quiet each one. You count, your finger tracing the ridges as your lips move silently. Somewhere around 50, your thoughts blur. By 90, you're not sure what you were thinking about to begin with. That's the point. When the counting ends, the combs are stacked neatly, pressed under warm stones to flatten them. The scent rising from them is thick and sweet, like a library made of sugar. Then comes the inspection. Brother Hovannes appears with a small brass lens and begins examining each finished comb like a jeweler. "Too thin," he murmurs over one. "Beautiful but useless." He nods approvingly at yours. This one listens well. You are unsure whether he means the comb or you. Either way, you feel proud. To close the session, the monks offer a brief chant, not sung but whispered, while gently tapping their combs in rhythm. The sound is soft, wooden, like the creaking of ancient trees in wind. You follow along. Afterward, each monk is invited to press a symbol into one piece of wax. You choose a spiral. It feels right. Then comes the part you didn't expect. The comb offering. You are led to a small, round stone platform in the middle of the garden. At its center stands a squat pillar with a shallow bowl carved into the top. One by one, monks place a piece of cleaned comb into the bowl and speak a word, just one. You hear? Return. Quiet. Mother. Forgive. When it's your turn, you hesitate. Then you whisper, stay. The word settles in the air like pollen on still water. You place your comb into the bowl. The sun finally breaks through the mist. The courtyard glows, and the bees return. They buzz around the bowl, landing briefly, circling as if inspecting your offering. One rests on your thumb, and you let it. You're not told where you're going next, only that you'll need sturdy shoes and a steady heart. That's the extent of the monk's briefing, which you suspect is either a subtle joke or a complete failure of risk disclosure. Brother Arakel leads you past the southern hives, over a narrow trail that winds into the trees. You recognize the grove, the same one housing the wild hives. But today you're going deeper, past the familiar hollows and honey-slick trunks, into the forest's dense belly. The air thickens. The bees are fewer now, but still present, quiet companions flitting ahead like winged scouts. Eventually, the trees open into a glade. At its center, a circle of stone benches surrounding what appears to be an altar, but not for worship, for watching. This is the observation circle. Here, the monks observe the flight, not just the literal comings and goings of bees, but their patterns, their timing, their posture in the air. They carry stories, Arakel explains. If you know how to look, you sit. The others settle in silently. No one takes notes. No one points. The monks simply watch. You do too. At first it's like watching grass grow. Bees fly in, bees fly out, wings blur. Pollen drifts, but then patterns emerge. One bee hovers, waiting for another to leave the same flower. Another zigzags, then circles back, not lost, just lingering. A group spirals together, breaking apart, rejoining, like a school of fish made of sunlight, and gradually you feel your breath sync with their rhythm. Their flight becomes a kind of choreography, quiet and deliberate, punctuated by stillnesses that mean as much as the movement. Brother Hovhannes leans over and whispers, That's a morning flight. You glance toward a bee climbing out of a shadowed hive entrance, its pace slow, wings half open, body dusted in white pollen. She's looking for someone who won't come back. You feel something tighten in your throat. Historians debate whether monks truly understood bee behavior or simply projected meaning onto it. The truth likely lies in both, but here, watching with them, it's hard not to believe the bees are saying something. Later, you're handed a wax board and a stylus. No instructions, you write. She turned in place 3 times. Then left. You pass it to Arakel. He nods, adds it to the stack. Another monk draws a bee mid-turn, with tiny lines radiating from its wings like sunbursts. This is how we remember, Sahak says. Not facts. Movement. The monks call it the language of return, the way bees always find their way back, even if they've strayed miles, even if the wind has shifted, even if the hive has changed. They say watching the bees teaches you how to go home. You aren't sure where home is right now, but you feel like you're learning the way. The bees begin to slow as the sun tilts westward. The monks pack up their boards. The final ritual in the glade is simple. One by one, each monk dips their finger in a jar of honey and presses it to the bark of a specific tree, gnarled, ancient, thick with ivy. It's known as the Tree of First Flight. Legend says it's where the monastery's founding queen landed centuries ago, or perhaps it's just the oldest tree here. Either way, the honey marks shimmer in the late sun. You press your finger, sticky and warm, to the bark. A bee lands beside your print, walks a slow spiral, then flies off. Accepted, Sahek says. You hike back in silence. The forest hums with late summer heat and distant wings. At the edge of the trees, you pause and turn. The glade is gone, swallowed by green. As if it was never there at all, evening deepens. The monastery glows like a lantern dropped into the valley, its windows flickering, its stone walls breathing warmth. You're ushered in through the eastern arch, your boots dusty from the glade, your thoughts honey-thick and oddly quiet. Brother Krikor meets you just inside the gate, holding a long scroll of parchment and a quill sharpened to an unforgiving point. Documentation duty, he says. Tonight's theme, metaphor. You've learned better than to ask for clarification. The scriptorium is warmer than usual. A fire crackles in the hearth, and several monks are already hunched over desks, copying passages from previous scrolls, ink-stained fingertips fluttering like moths. You're guided to your usual seat. A wax tablet waits. Beside it, a small wooden box containing stencils, tiny hexagons, wing shapes, flowers, even a few bee faces with dramatically raised eyebrows. Tonight, you're told, every monk will attempt to describe something from the day without naming it. A challenge in poetic observation. Describe a bee without using the word bee, Sahak says, tapping his stylus against his chin. Or call wax something it has never been called before. You stare at your blank tablet. Eventually, you write, it builds rooms for dreams, but sleeps in none of them. Sahak peers over your shoulder. That's either very wise or very confused. Both, you answer. Perfect, he replies. Monks read aloud their metaphors. One describes wax as sunlight caught in a net. Another likens the hive to a library that hums its own index. A novice stammers through a description of pollen that somehow ends with ghost feathers for plants, and earns a slow clap from Brother Hovhannes. The metaphors are copied onto a collective scroll, a long, never-ending poem titled The Book of Flightless Wings. You ask who started it. Krikor shrugs. Might have been Brother Levon. Or maybe the bees. No one seems to care which. After the metaphor session, Sahak announces it's time to open the Scroll of Forgotten Remedies, an old water-stained parchment that records every experimental bee-related treatment the monastery has ever attempted. He unrolls it dramatically. Some entries include, for sleeplessness, wax pellet under the tongue, works for monks, not for goats. For melancholy, sniff one wing, repeat until laughter. For aching knees, smear warm propolis. Wait for sunrise, pray once, complain twice. The monks take turns adding entries. You're encouraged to contribute. After some reflection you write, for a heart too full, press comb to chest, sit in sun. Do nothing. They nod. It's added immediately. Then comes a stranger task, the comb of memory. A large, perfectly preserved wax comb is passed around, each monk invited to whisper one memory into its cells. It is believed, or at least hoped, that bees store the sound, as they do scent in wax. One by one, monks bend low and murmur into the hexagons. The first time I wasn't stung. My mother, singing while stirring honey. The night the bees returned early. I knew I was forgiven. When it's your turn, you hesitate. Then you whisper, the moment I realized I stopped being afraid. You're not sure if the comb hears you, but you feel lighter anyway. The comb is returned to a sealed box lined with velvet and old hymnal fragments. A single drop of honey is dripped onto the center before it's closed. Brother Krikor says this is to anchor the memories in sweetness. You don't argue. As the night stretches on, the monks gradually drift off, some to their cells, others to corners with pillows made from lavender and sheep's wool. You remain a little longer, rereading the metaphors, the remedies, the soft-spoken memories now captured forever in wax and ink. Before you leave, Sahak presses something into your palm. A comb-shaped pendant carved from beeswax and hardened with resin. It fits perfectly in your hand. For when you forget, he says. Hold it until you remember. Remember what? He smiles. Whatever the bees remember for you. You walk slowly back to your cell, the pendant warm from his hand, your footsteps silent on the cool stone floor. You lie down without a candle tonight. The pendant rests beside you. The dark doesn't feel empty. It feels full of wings. By now, the rhythm of the monastery has settled into your bones. You wake not from the nekos, not from dreams, but from an invisible shift in the air, the subtle hush of morning being arranged like prayer beads. You pull on your robe before your eyes fully open, and by the time you cross the threshold of your cell, you're already chewing a piece of wax the monks call morning gum. Good for the jaw, good for the soul, Sahak once said, though it tastes mostly like old candles. Today, you're summoned to an unfamiliar corner of the monastery, a narrow hallway behind the chapel that leads curiously upward. You climb a staircase that narrows as it ascends. Brother Krikor follows behind, carrying a long pole with a hooked end and a folded parchment. We're doing maintenance, he says. In the attic. You did not know the monastery had an attic. You arrive in a small domed chamber at the very top of the chapel. Light spills through high slits, casting long beams that dance with dust motes and the occasional bee. The smell here is different, older, more complex. Dry parchment, smoke. Lavender, old leather, a hint of mildew and melted wax. This is the memory loft. The space is filled with scrolls, wooden boxes, ancient robes, broken candles, dried herbs, bundled in disintegrating string. It looks like someone took every scrap of forgotten monastic life and stacked it lovingly in organized chaos. You begin with the scrolls, unrolling each slowly to check for mold or damage. Some contain hymns written in strange hexagonal patterns. Others list bee lineage, names, dates, qualities. Queen Arsha-Louise, bold flyer, lemon pollen enthusiast. Some even include hand-drawn portraits, stylized, of course. Still, the monks insisted. Historians debate whether these genealogies are literal, Krikor says, gently wiping dust from a scroll edge, or metaphorical, or entirely fictional. Either way, we honor them. You find a scroll titled, When Bees Wept. You raise an eyebrow. Krikor nods. Rain flooded a hive. The monks said the bees mourned. They swirled above the chapel for hours. You ask if he believes that's true. I believe they stayed, he answers. And that's enough. You catalog old relics, beeswax stamps worn down to nubs, tiny honey pots sealed with red thread, a hive knife with initials carved in the handle, BG 1187. No one knows who BG was. Maybe a monk. Maybe a queen, Sahak offers when asked. We don't throw things away here, even mysteries. One corner of the attic holds a stack of wax tablets, thick ones, layered and cracked. You open one and find what looks like a poem. We are not the fire, we are the warm after. Another tablet reads, The queen sleeps, we wait. Not because we must, because it's beautiful. You feel something shift in your chest. These aren't just memories. They're echoes. Next comes the lighting check. Krikor hands you the long hooked pole. Your job, adjust the lanterns. Several hang from beams high above. You test each one, gently nudging them to make sure they swing freely and haven't become stuck with melted wax. One breaks loose and crashes onto a padded stool below. Krikor doesn't flinch. That's why we stuff the furniture, he says. Once the lanterns are secured, you sweep. Yes. You sweep. The monks insist on keeping dust from piling in corners, claiming it interferes with recollection. You suspect it's also just good practice. As you clean, you uncover an oddity, a small wooden box tucked into a crack in the floorboards. Inside, a wax model of a hive with tiny bees carved onto it, each no bigger than a lentil. Sahak examines it. An old teaching tool, he says. We used to pass it around during chanting practice. If it survived, the rhythm was good. You hold it gently. The bees look worn but intact. You understand. The final ritual in the attic is one of inscription. Each monk is asked to add something to the attic wall, a phrase, a name, a date, even just a symbol scratched into the stone with a shard of comb-hardened resin. You're handed a shard. You think, and then carve, I stayed. And listened. That's enough. The monks nod. Before you leave, you're given a tiny jar. No label, no explanation. Inside, comb fragments, dried lavender, a curl of old wax ribbon. A portable memory, Krikor says. Shake it when you forget what silence sounds like. You pocket it. On your way down, the bells begin their slow afternoon toll. The attic fades behind you, cool, dusty, golden, and still. But something about it lingers in your bones, like the low hum of wings. This afternoon, instead of a scroll, Sahak hands you a small clay bowl filled with something that looks like yellow porridge and smells like fresh bread, rain, and crushed flowers. Salve duty, he announces. Time to make balm for the bones. You are led to the monastery's healing room, a cozy, sunlit alcove with honeycomb-shaped shelves, bundles of drying herbs hanging from every rafter, and a faint, ever-present smell of thyme, calendula, and propolis. The walls are painted with faded illustrations of bees perched on human shoulders, whispering into monks' ears. Metaphorical, Brother Krikor says, though you're not entirely convinced. On a wide central table sit rows of tiny clay pots, their lids sealed with wax. Sahak hands you a small knife. Cut and mix, he says. Equal parts beeswax, oil, and thoughtfulness. You begin by slicing soft beeswax blocks into thin shavings, the golden curls piling like petals. Brother Arakel appears with a jug of warm olive oil, infused with chamomile and comfrey. For inflammation, he murmurs, pouring it over the wax until it begins to soften. The mixture is stirred slowly over a clay stove, releasing a smell that reminds you of clean earth and old letters. Patience, Sahak says, guiding your hand. A balm must never be rushed, like grief, like healing. Once the wax melts fully, powdered herbs are stirred in. You recognize some, lavender, yarrow, rosemary. Others you don't, labeled only with cryptic names like blessed shadow, whisper flower, and leaf that knows. Local names, Arakel explains. Translated from the bees. You're not sure if he's joking. As the balm thickens, each monk adds something personal to the mix. Sahak drops in a single tear-shaped bead of propolis and whispers, "For Brother Garen's back." Krikor adds a flake of rose petal. For softness, one novice sneezes into his elbow and mutters, "For allergies." You're invited to contribute. You glance around, think. Then pluck a single strand of the honey-colored thread from your robe's seam and drop it in. Sahak raises an eyebrow. Symbolic? You nod. He nods back. The balm is poured into the tiny pots with wooden spoons. Each one is sealed with a wax coin bearing the monastery seal, a stylized queen with her wings outstretched in welcome or warning. While the pots cool, the monks begin reading from the Codex of Soothing, a handwritten book filled with ailments and the monk-approved treatments for them. Some are sensible, others less so. Swollen knees, balm, warm compress, and stare directly at the moon. Wounded pride, 2 spoons of honey, long nap, minimal eye contact. Night fears, balm to chest, sing to the bees, face east until calm returns. You contribute your own entry. Soul ache, chronic. Rub balm into palms, press hands to hive wall, wait. Sahak reads it aloud. No one laughs, a few nod. After the balms are sealed, they are stored in the cupboard of consideration, a hand-carved cabinet where each shelf is lined with linen and dried mint. Every balm has a label. You notice one reads simply, "For when nothing else helps." You're given your own pot to keep. No one should leave empty-handed, Krikor says. You thank him. Then comes the secondary duty, application. Yes, today you will rub balm into the sore joints of monks who have spent decades climbing towers, lifting hives, and writing for too long on wax too stiff. You're guided to a low stone bench in the corner. Brother Hovhannes sits before you, extending 1 foot without a word. You warm the balm between your palms. It melts into a smooth sheen. You begin to rub gently into his ankle. Not too soft, he grunts. This joint has outlived empires. You adjust your pressure. Other monks queue up. Elbows, knees, knuckles, necks. They chat softly as you work. About the weather, the bees, the peculiar dream someone had about a flying teacup and a talking queen. You're treated like one of them now, a quiet guest with sticky fingers and a knack for listening. When the queue ends, you find Sahak beside you, already rubbing balm into his own wrist. Some aches never leave, he says. You just get better at being gentle with them. You don't answer, but you understand. As the sun lowers, the pots are packed away. Each monk takes a small one back to his cell. Yours goes into your sash, tucked beside the wax pendant. That night at supper, no one speaks of balm or bones, only bees and bread. And the moment one monk tried to apply salve to a bee and was very politely chased for half a courtyard, you laugh out loud. And it feels like balm, too. The next morning, instead of the usual soft knock or folded wax stamp note, you are awakened by a single, sustained hum. It isn't loud, but it vibrates in your bones. It comes from everywhere, through the walls, the window, your skin. You sit up slowly, half dreaming, half listening. The candle beside your bed has burned down to a waxy stump. Your robe still smells of herbs and bees. By the time you make your way to the courtyard, the monks are already assembled. No one is speaking. No one is moving. Every face is turned upward. Above them, above you, the sky is filled with bees, not angry. Not hurried, just moving, thousands of them spiraling upward in a great lazy corkscrew. A bee cyclone, a celestial swarm. It pulses like breath. Brother Krikor stands in the center of the courtyard, hands clasped behind his back. "Today," he says quietly, "is a migration day." He turns to you. "We follow." You blink. Follow? To the valley, to witness, and maybe to carry something back. That is the only explanation offered. Within the hour, you are packed, not like a traveler, but like a witness. Robe, sash, a pouch of balm, your wax pendant, and a sealed jar of Queen's Tax honey tucked into a sling around your shoulder. A walking stick is pressed into your hand. At the top, a carved bee, its wings stretched as if in flight. The monks begin their descent into the valley with surprising speed. Despite the age in their bones, their feet are sure. The trail down winds between cliffs and terraces, past rows of ancient fig trees and rocky outcrops that buzz with bee traffic. You walk in silence. Only the occasional crunch of gravel or rustle of robes breaks the hum. And overhead, the swarm drifts like smoke toward the far hills. You reach the lower valley by midday. The landscape opens into fields of wild thyme, purple and gold in the breeze. Daisies bob like sleepy eyes. A stream threads through the grass like a silver whisper. Here the monks stop. They begin constructing a small shrine, not with tools or blueprints, but with movements that suggest they've done this before. Stones are stacked. Beeswax is pressed into crevices. Wildflowers are laid in circular patterns. In the center, a jar of honey, yours, is uncorked. A single spoonful is poured onto a flat stone. The scent carries immediately. The bees respond. They arrive not in chaos, but in waves, settling on flowers, circling the stones, exploring the shrine. No monk speaks, no one instructs. The bees know. Or perhaps the monks believe enough to make it so. You are invited to make an offering. You kneel. Place your wax pendant in the center of the shrine. You don't entirely know why. No one questions it. Krikor hums a low note. Others join, forming a layered sound that is not quite a song, not quite a prayer. It hums in your ribs. It feels like it was meant for this moment. Then something unexpected. The monks remove small slips of parchment from their robes, each marked with symbols, drawings, and names, and tuck them into cracks between the shrine stones. Sahak hands you one. It is blank. You're told to write something, anything that needs to be left behind. You think, then write. The part of me that thought I couldn't stay. You slide it into the stone. It fits like it was waiting for you. After a time, an hour, more, the swarm begins to thin. The bees lift one by one until only the lazy buzz of stragglers remains. The monks do not watch them go. Instead, they kneel beside the shrine and rest their hands on the earth. A soft chant rises. You may go. We will wait. You may build. We will tend. You may sting. We will still return. It's part farewell, part blessing. Possibly a promise, possibly a hope. By late afternoon, the shrine is left behind. No markings, no signpost, just a circle of wax, stone, and memory. As you hike back uphill, your muscles ache, but not badly, not like before. The road is the same, but your body has changed. The bees are gone from the sky now, but not from your thoughts. Back at the monastery, a new silence has settled in. A good one, a full one. You go to your cell and find your wax pendant has been returned, tucked beneath your pillow, now etched with a new symbol, a small spiral. You sleep with it in your hand. And that night, your dreams are full of slow wings, soft songs, and something warm pressed gently against your chest. You wake later than usual, not from fatigue, but from a silence so thick and deep it feels like sleeping underwater. When you open your eyes, the light through your window is golden gray, like a fog bank made of honey. There's no nakos, no footsteps in the corridor, no rustling robes or buzzing wings. You step outside and discover the monastery has stopped, not in a dangerous way, just paused. No one is sweeping, no one is tending hives. Even the bees seem to be on a break, lounging in small clusters on windowsills and stone ledges like sleepy cats. You find Sahak near the herb beds, kneeling quietly beside a sprig of lemon thyme. He smiles when he sees you. Today is the day of no motion. He gestures for you to sit beside him. It comes twice a season, he explains. No chores, no chants. No combs, just observation. You're not sure what to do with this information, but we're still doing something, you ask. Sahak nods. We are stilling. He offers you a handful of chamomile petals. Hold these until they stop moving. You do. For a long time, they twitch in the breeze. Then gradually, as your own breathing slows, so do the petals. When you glance at Sahak again, his eyes are closed. His lips form the shape of a word, but no sound escapes. You do the same, forming your own thought and letting it rest like wax poured into a mold. You spend the morning sitting, walking, sitting again. The monks drift like clouds, their movements unhurried, their eyes often closed or focused on small things, an ant trail, a sunbeam, the flick of a bee's tongue against pollen. At one point, you find yourself staring at the shadow of a hive on the stone wall. The bees within move invisibly, but their shape remains, a hum in negative space. You stare until the shadow becomes more real than the hive itself. Later, Sahak hands you a wax tablet and a stylus, but this time you're not to write anything. You're to unwrite, he says. You frown. Unwrite? He shows you how to gently heat the tablet over a candle flame, softening the words written days ago. The letters collapse, curl in on themselves, melt into gold. This is how we make space, he says. You nod and offer your own tablet, the one you'd marked with, I stayed and listened. You hesitate. Then hold it to the flame. The words vanish, not forgotten. Just integrated. You feel lighter. Around midday, a monk you barely know, Brother Stepan, approaches and hands you a single walnut shell filled with water and a tiny scrap of wax floating in the center. This is the drift bowl, he says. Set it on the stream behind the apiary. Watch where it goes. You do as told. The shell bobbles gently on the surface of the water, caught in eddies, bouncing against mossy rocks, slipping beneath a low-hanging herb frond. It doesn't go far, but it goes. Stepan nods. Not everything needs to arrive. Some things just need to move. You feel something unlock behind your ribs. By late afternoon, the air is warm and soft. The bees begin to wake again, but even they seem to stretch before working. Their movements are lazier, less pointed. They swirl in lazy patterns above the herb beds, leaving pollen trails like calligraphy. You find Sahak again beneath the fig tree. He's rubbing a thumbprint into a wax ball, then pressing it flat between two stones. What's that one for, you ask? Nothing, he says. It's already enough. You sit beside him. He hands you a wax ball. You do the same, and for a while, you both just breathe. When the sun begins to set, the Naxos is finally struck. Once. A single low thump that echoes through the stone. It means you may begin again. The monks return to their routines, gently, quietly. Someone begins baking bread. Another lights the first evening candle. You return to your cell and find a note beneath your wax pendant. It reads, "In stillness, the hive waits. In stillness, we remember. You remembered." That's all we needed. You smile. You sleep. You don't dream. Not because you're too tired, but because there's nothing to fix. Nothing to mend. Just a slow hum where your thoughts used to be, and that is more than enough. You wake to the smell of roasted barley and beeswax, an unusual pairing, yet somehow comforting. A folded strip of vellum lies at the foot of your bed. Inked in honey gold script are the words, "Today you ferment." Naturally, you expect this to involve food. It does not. You find Brother Krikor in the shadowed nook beneath the apiary tower, surrounded by jars, bowls, ladles, and an intimidating number of linen-wrapped bundles. The room smells like old fruit, vinegar, crushed flowers, and the sharp note of something recently scorched. He gestures to a long stone table. "Today," he says, "you will begin to understand what it means to wait beautifully." He unwraps one of the linen bundles and reveals a comb submerged in amber-colored syrup. "Mead," he says. In process. He lifts a second jar, this one full of pale liquid tinged green, with a sprig of rosemary floating lazily on top. "Vinegar," he adds, "but not angry." And then a third. You peer in and see only foam. "Fermented wax paste," he says. "Don't ask. You decide not to." Fermentation, you learn, is one of the monastery's deeper rituals, not just for preservation, but as metaphor. "A thing broken down," Sahak says, appearing beside you with a funnel and a wink, "can be sweeter than it ever was whole." The day unfolds in layers. First, you're assigned to stirring duty, slow, consistent movements, never clockwise, always in the direction bees dance when giving directions. "Sunwise," Arakel mutters. "They always know where the sun is, even in their sleep." As you stir, Brother Hovannes approaches with a carved wooden stick, the tip painted red. He dips it into one jar, tastes, frowns, then scribbles something in a ledger. The monks record each batch's flavor in poetic terms. Tastes like forgotten orchard in a dry spring. Bitter at first, then memory of lilac. One stung tongue, good with bread. Too sad. Let it sit longer. You ask if these notes are for science or posterity. Krikor shrugs. "For truth, maybe." The second task is naming. Every batch of honey mead, every vinegar infusion, even the jars of spiced wax drink, all are given a name before bottling. You're told to choose carefully. "Don't name what it is," Sahak says. Name what it becomes. You bottle a mild lemony vinegar and label it "After Thunder." They approve. Someone else names a smoky mead, the one who stayed up too late. Another, grandmother's second try. The shelves fill with these bottled stories. Each label bears not only the name, but a tiny wax seal shaped like a bee's footprint, a pattern only visible when the light hits just right. Then comes the listening. The monks place a series of sealed jars onto a broad wooden table, press their ears against the lids, and listen. You join them, unsure what to expect. And hear it, tiny pops, gentle fizz. A sigh. "The sound of transformation," Sahak whispers. "Every bubble is a future. Some jars are still sleeping," they say. Others bubble madly, rebellious. Yours hisses softly. "Patient," Krikor says. Later in the afternoon, you are led to the room of long ferments, a cool underground chamber lined with shelves and cobwebs. Every jar down here is labeled with dates so old they blur the line between recipe and relic. One jar, older than several empires, sits at the far end, surrounded by tiny carved bees made from bone. You ask why they keep it. Sahak simply replies, "Because it's still working." Before the day ends, you're handed a single empty jar. Your assignment, begin a ferment that only you will understand. You wander the herb garden, gather what feels right. Dried mint, half a lemon peel, a pinch of wax scraped from your robe's hem. You mix it with a few drops of honey. Top it with spring water. Seal it. Label, "The First Quiet." They place it on a high shelf. No one says a word. You leave the chamber with sticky fingers and a strange peace. That night, in your cell, the smell of ferment clings to your hands, sweet, tangy, alive. You lie awake a little longer than usual, listening, not to bees or bells, but to the quiet gurgle of change. And you wonder, what's fermenting in you? You are roused before dawn, not by the nakos, not by Brother Krikor's snoring down the corridor, but by an unfamiliar sound. wind rushing in short breaths through the stones. It feels like the monastery itself is exhaling. At your door is a single object, a wooden spindle wrapped with beeswax-coated thread and a note tied to it reading, "Today, thread the memory." You're not entirely sure what that means. Sahak meets you in the cloister walkway, robes already flecked with dew. He motions for you to follow, this time not to the scriptorium, not to the hives or fermentation cellars, but to a long, narrow hall you've never entered before. The door creaks like it's used only on rare occasions. Inside, the smell is different. Less beeswax and barley, more cedar, lavender, and old cloth. This is the room of repairs. Dozens of spindles hang from pegs along the walls, each coiled with waxed thread of a different color: gold, ochre, deep plum, olive green. In the center, monks sit in near silence, threading, stitching, mending robes, bags, books, and scroll edges. But the repairs are unusual. One monk is sewing a piece of parchment into the hem of his robe. Another is stitching wax cloth into the lining of a pillow. One novice is wrapping thread around a stone. You're handed a small pouch filled with broken things: a torn wax tablet wrapper, a beeswax seal that cracked in half, a fragment of a torn scroll with a single word still legible: "Return." Sahak places his hand on your shoulder. "These aren't just items," he says. "They're pieces of yesterday. We don't throw away yesterday." So, you learn to stitch. It's harder than it looks. The waxed thread sticks, your fingers fumble, the tiny needle bites at your thumb. But slowly, stitch by sticky stitch, you begin to understand the rhythm. Each mend is deliberate, each knot is a choice. You choose to repair the wax seal first. You warm it slightly between your palms, press the halves together, and wrap a thin spiral of gold thread around it. Not perfect, but stable. You feel something ease in your chest. Later, you're shown a collection of memory satchels, small cloth bundles tied with comb-scented twine. Each contains something different: a sliver of bark, a drop of honey, a folded note, a dried flower, a bee wing. They're kept in a box labeled "Still Useful." The monks explain that every monk creates their own memory satchel before leaving or dying. You're invited to begin yours. You walk slowly through the monastery, choosing items with instinct more than thought. A wax flake from the door to the apiary tower, a thread from your repair project, a bit of crushed rosemary from the garden, one petal from the flower pressed into your honey bowl, a scrap of vellum from the fermentation room that still faintly smells of lemon peel. You tie it closed with the golden thread and press it into a small jar lined with soft wool. Sahak watches. He says nothing. He doesn't need to. Then comes the final ritual, the threading of the archive. Every monk must stitch their name, not in ink, not on paper, but into a great cloth that hangs in the hallway between the scriptorium and the apiary. The cloth is impossibly long. Some names are fresh, threads still glinting. Others have faded to shadows. Some you can't even decipher anymore. You're handed a needle and thread. No one tells you what to write. Just where? You choose a space near the bottom, quiet, humble, almost hidden behind a fold. And you stitch, slowly. Just that. A single word. A pronoun. An invitation. The monks don't ask why. But Brother Hovhannes passes by and murmurs, "We've been waiting for that one." As the day ends, the room of repairs empties out. The wind outside has calmed. A few bees drift lazily through the high windows, indifferent to your careful threadwork. You leave your needle in a bowl marked for next time. And when you return to your cell, you find your repaired wax seal sitting on your pillow. Someone has wrapped it with a fresh ribbon and a note that simply says, "It held." You fall asleep holding it in your hand, and it does. This morning you're met at your door by Brother Krikor, who doesn't knock or speak. He simply holds out a small wooden bowl and waits. You peer inside. A single spoon, a shallow layer of golden honey, and beneath that, a key. Krikor nods once and walks away. No instructions, no notes. No ceremony. You take the key. It's old iron, shaped like a comb, with 6 teeth instead of the usual 5. A tiny bee is etched at the base, wings open. It smells faintly of clove and wax. You wander the monastery, holding the key like a question. Eventually, your fingers guide you down a narrow staircase you hadn't noticed before, past a loose stone in the wall, around the fermentation chamber, and finally to a low wooden door set deep in shadow. You press the key into the lock. It clicks. Behind the door lies a space smaller than your cell, but unlike any other you've seen here. It's not a chapel, not a workshop. No bees buzz here. No monks chant. This is the room of forgotten things. Dust hangs in the air like thick silk. Shelves line the walls, stacked with unlabeled boxes, folded robes, broken wax seals, shriveled herbs tied with disintegrating twine. In the corner sits a wax mannequin, its head a melted lump, draped in a robe so old it might disintegrate if you breathed too hard. You step inside and feel the air change. Warmer. Still, waiting. You open the first box. Inside, scraps of poems, only partially legible. And if the wings should fail, still we hum. The next, a pile of smooth stones, each etched with a single letter. Some are in languages you don't recognize. Some have been half sanded off. Another box, candle stubs. All slightly different shapes, lengths, and wax types. Burned halfway down, then snuffed, each one tied with a strand of black thread. Sahak appears in the doorway. He doesn't speak, just picks up a tiny bell from a shelf, rings it once, and walks away. The hum you know so well resumes, low, comforting, omnipresent. You sit on the floor. A ledger lies open on a small table in the center of the room. Faded ink, fragile pages. A note in the corner reads, "Write only what was nearly lost." You pick up the pen, which is not a pen at all, but a stylus dipped in old propolis, and begin. You don't write much, only this. I almost forgot how to stay still. You place the ledger back carefully. Then you notice a hive box tucked into the far wall, sealed shut with wax so thick it's almost armor. It bears a sign that reads, "Do not open. Do not forget." Curious, you lean closer, press your ear against it. Inside the faintest hum, the bees are in there, still alive. Still waiting, you understand. Not everything that is sealed is abandoned. Some things are protected until the time is right. Before you leave, you're invited to add one item of your own to the collection. You search your sash, your robe, your pockets. Everything you own feels too recent, too remembered. Then your fingers brush against the wax pendant. You hesitate. Then pull free the golden thread you tied around it during repairs. You wind it into a small circle and place it in a velvet-lined drawer labeled Almosts. Then you lock the room behind you. The key, you're told, must be returned to the Queen's tax altar, where it rests atop the original honey spoon used centuries ago by the founder monk, Brother Sarkis, who allegedly tamed a swarm by singing lullabies through a rolled-up scroll. Historians still argue whether he was real or metaphor. You place the key there gently. It glints once, as if winking. And then you're sent to the bathing chamber, which is not for cleanliness, but for shedding. You undress, enter the water, and find it filled with tiny, floating wax discs, each inscribed with a word or phrase. They bump against your arms, your chest, your knees. Some stick. You pick one up. Pause. Another. Forget. You hold both. Let them dissolve. As you dry yourself off with a towel that smells faintly of thyme and lemon balm, Sahak passes by the doorway. "Do you feel lighter?" he asks. You nod, and you do. That night, the monks don't gather for a meal. Instead, they leave small wax bowls outside each door. Inside each bowl, honey, warm and soft. And a note, for all you carried. You eat slowly, in silence, and sleep so deeply that even the bees don't dare wake you. The next morning is different. You can feel it before your feet hit the floor. Something in the air has shifted, cleaner, quieter, more settled. The stones underfoot are cool, but not cold. The candle you forgot to snuff last night has burned itself out without incident, and your wax pendant lies at the foot of your bed, freshly polished and inexplicably tied with a single blue thread. Today, there is no task waiting. No bowl, no spindle, no silent sahak with an eyebrow raised in quiet expectation. Just stillness. You step into the courtyard and something stops you. The bees are gone. Not all of them, but most. The ever-present hum has quieted. The sky is clear and pale, and only a few stragglers float lazily near the rosemary hedge. A monk is sweeping, gently, reverently, as if not to wake something sleeping just below the surface of the world. Sahak finds you beside the fountain. He smiles. It's not a sad smile, or a proud one. It's the smile of someone who knows a circle has closed. They've moved on, he says softly. The queen gave her signal 2 nights ago. You blink. I didn't hear anything. He nods. Good, you weren't supposed to. You follow him to the empty hive garden, a row of box hives now silent, their wax combs gleaming in the sunlight like fossilized clouds. The lids are slightly ajar, opened just enough to show they are no longer homes, but altars. Each one bears a new inscription, faintly etched into the frame. We stayed, we sang, we left. For what was mended? She flew. We followed. You recognize your own handwriting on one of the boxes. You don't remember writing it, but the words are yours. And I listened until the quiet made sense. Sahak tells you it's time to begin the undoing, not destruction. Not departure, just unweaving. Over the next few hours, you and the monks begin disassembling pieces of the daily rituals you once clung to, stacking the honey bowls, folding the balm cloths, extinguishing candles that had burned since your arrival. In the room of ferments, you find your jar, the first quiet, still intact. A thin film has formed across the top. You gently stir it once with a beeswax stick, then cap it. Take it, Krikor says. You'll know when to drink it. In the room of repairs, you see the ledger where you once wrote, I almost forgot how to stay still. Someone has underlined the word forgot and drawn a bee beside it. You laugh quietly. In the scriptorium, your wax tablet is returned to you. The one you melted, the one you unwrote. And yet, it has reformed ever so slightly with new ridges. You hold it to the light and see faint marks, like echoes, not words exactly, but impressions, like the wax remembers what you once let go. Sahak meets you at the edge of the orchard, where the first bees taught you silence. You've been here long enough, he says. Is that an invitation to leave? No, he says. It's a reminder that you can. You're given a small bundle, your robe, your satchel, your jar of ferment, your wax pendant, and a new pair of sandals carved with hexagonal treads. And a final item, a beeswax disc stamped with the monastery seal and wrapped in a strip of cloth that reads, Present this to no one. It is only for remembering. Before you leave, you visit the Queen's tax altar one last time. The spoon is gone, in its place, a single bee wing pinned beneath a drop of clear wax. You bow, not because it's expected, but because it feels correct. At the edge of the gate, you turn back. The monastery glows, not with fire or sun, but with something deeper, continuance. Sahak raises his hand, you raise yours, and then the gate opens. You step into the world, not as a guest, but as one who has carried silence, tasted memory, and survived the hum. Your journey continues, outward now, but never away, never again away. You step beyond the gate as if waking from a long, golden dream. The road waiting for you is not grand. It's a narrow footpath, its edges laced with thyme and loose gravel, descending gently into the misty folds of the lower valley. The sun hasn't quite broken the ridgeline, but light is slowly soaking into the sky like ink into parchment. For the first time in what feels like a century, but may only have been weeks, you walk alone, no chance behind you. No bees ahead, only your footsteps. The monastery doesn't vanish. Not entirely. You glance back once and catch a final glimpse of the stone walls, the rooftop hives, the spiral tower framed by a ring of early morning haze. The place you couldn't have survived on the first day. The place that became something like a heartbeat. You turn forward. The first hour is quiet. But not empty. You begin to notice small things, the crispness of birdsong, the crunch of sandal tread on dry leaves, the honey-colored warmth of the wax pendant pressing gently against your chest. You still don't know where you're going. But for once, the not knowing isn't scary. You come across a traveler resting beneath an olive tree, an older woman with a walking staff and a thick satchel brimming with herbs and seeds. She nods as you pass. "Peace to your pollen," she says. You blink. She grins. "Smell like bees. Don't worry, it's a good thing." Later, at a stream, you rinse your face. Pull out your jar, the first quiet, open it. You're not sure what you expect. The smell is perfect, not sweet, not sour, not even describable. It just smells like everything you carried, everything you let go, and everything you never thought you'd get to feel again. You don't drink it, not yet. Instead, you reseal it and tuck it back into your satchel, placing it gently beside your wax seal, your blue thread, and a folded strip of cloth with a single word scribbled on it: return. Hours pass. You see a bee. Just one. It hovers, circles your head once, then darts off down the path. You follow. Eventually, you find a grove of mulberry trees. A boy is harvesting silk cocoons and whistling a tune you remember vaguely from the cloister, something Brother Hovannes sang when his knees didn't ache. You pause, ask if he needs help. He doesn't answer, just hands you a cocoon and smiles. So you sit, and for the rest of the afternoon, you work beside him, in silence. Unspooling thread, sorting husks, letting time pass without needing to know where it goes. When you leave, he presses a tiny, waxed paper square into your hand. Inside, a single bee wing, not dried. Not dead, just drawn, in ink. A message, perhaps. Or maybe just a hello. You walk until the stars come out, then stop beneath a tree whose bark smells like memory. You build a small fire, not to keep warm, just to see the shadows dance. And as the embers settle, you whisper a few words. Not a prayer, not a spell, just thank you for the hum. Then, for the first time since leaving the monastery, you close your eyes and sleep. No dreams, only quiet, only stillness. Only the soft, low buzz of something within you, something that stayed. You wake to a world that doesn't rush to greet you. The sky is pale, the breeze almost indecisive, and the air carries no particular scent, just the gentle nothingness of morning before it chooses to be something. You stretch beneath your tree, legs stiff, wax pendant pressing lightly into your collarbone like a small, persistent reminder. Yes, it happened. Yes, you are changed. There's no plan today, just the road. And yet, you walk differently now. You listen more, step softer. Carry less. At some point, you pass a tiny stone shrine nestled beneath an overhang of ivy. A single bee hovers there, nosing a faded bundle of rosemary someone has tucked into the crook of the stones. You add a petal from your pocket, one of the last from your balm-making day. The bee lingers as you move on, then vanishes with a hum that trails like a whisper. You pass through villages where the smell of baking bread stirs 1,000 small memories. Brother Krikor scowling at his lopsided loaves. Sahak humming while shaping dough with honey-sticky fingers. The quiet breakfast after the Queen's migration, when no one needed to speak. You don't tell anyone where you've been. They wouldn't understand. But they seem to feel something in your presence, like a faint warmth in winter or the quietness of a forest clearing. A girl offers you a plum. You thank her in the language of the monastery by holding it to your heart before taking the first bite. Somewhere near dusk, you find a hollow between two hills and settle in. You place your satchel beside you, unwrap the wax seal you repaired long ago, and hold it up to the fading light. It hasn't cracked again. It hasn't changed at all. Except it has. You close your eyes and hum. Not a tune, not a melody, just a soft, resonant note, and for a moment you hear another humming back. Maybe a memory, maybe a promise, maybe a wing beat you'll never need to name. The night cools. Stars arrive like old friends. You press your hand to your chest, just over the pendant, and wait for sleep to find you. No fear, no rush. No plan, just presence, just you. Just the hum. And now, as the world folds gently around you like the edges of a well-worn robe, it's time to let the story settle. You've traveled far, not in miles, but in awareness. From stone corridors scented with wax and barley to wild bee valleys whispering secrets on the wind, you've carried memory, fermented change, unraveled fear, and stitched your place in silence. You've learned that slowness isn't laziness. That waiting can be its own kind of work, that even the smallest hum can be a language if you're quiet enough to hear it. So now, soften your breathing. Loosen your grip on the day. Let the thoughts that don't serve you fall like petals, gently drifting down to rest on still water. You don't need to fix anything now. You don't need to carry anything but calm. Let your limbs grow heavier. Let your pulse find the rhythm of beeswax dripping. Let your mind become the smooth inner wall of a honeycomb, still, glowing, and empty in the most nourishing way. The world will keep spinning. The bees will keep tending. And you, well, you can simply rest. Sleep now. Let the wings carry you. Let the silence hum you home. Let the monastery keep you in its gentle memory just a little while longer. You're safe. You're whole. You're here. Good night. Sweet dreams.